Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. This mic is a little bit too close to me right now. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. It is an early, bright, well, okay, I don't know if it's bright outside, but it is an early morning, a Wednesday. I hope you guys are doing all right this Wednesday, that you're safe, sound, wherever you are. I appreciate that you're listening to this voice. This early in the morning. I always say I am a bit shocked that people are doing and listening to politics this early in the morning. But I guess I'm doing politics this early in the morning. And if I'm doing politics this early in the morning, I'm not the only one who's interested in it. I want to give a shout out to the chat, everybody that is here this early in the morning. I see Diane Thomas, Mama Thomas is here, Matthew, Skeptical Jerk, Rami, Alexander Black, Jimmy, all of you, thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. A lot of us, and I'm going to start here, a lot of us have been very interested in the ending of the Ukraine war. Many of us who have been watching this have realized, A, it shouldn't have happened. B, it's a catastrophe. C, hundreds of thousands. I know some people use the million number. I don't know if it's a million. Every month it goes up by 500,000. I'm going to say 600,000 dead Ukrainians, hundreds of thousands of broken, wounded, mangled human beings in a war that never needed to take place, and in a war that is effectively lost. When Trump came in, there was this belief that the Trump administration, at the very least, vocally said that they were going to end the war. And to Trump's credit, made various moves seemingly in that direction. Now, I am not going to be a nitpicker on this. I'm going to wait to see how events unfold. Yesterday, there was a meeting between the United States and Ukraine. I asked, what is the point of this meeting? The reason why I asked, what is the point of this meeting, is because between Russia and the United States, there were very little diplomatic relations, at the very least, no overt diplomatic relations. Hell, we didn't even have an ambassador. And so a relationship or meeting between Russia and the US, well, that makes sense. You are reconnecting. You are coming up with the terms in which you will negotiate further, and the terms in which Putin and Trump would at some point, ideally, meet and hammer out some kind of agreement. Now, Russia has said, we're not for ceasefires. We've done this. We're not doing that again. There will be no Minsk 3. Any agreement that is made will be an overarching agreement to end it all. We are in it to create a new security architecture of Europe. That's what we want. Nothing else is suitable to those aims. Part of the reason to that is we've invested blood and treasure, meaning there have been 100, maybe 200,000 Russians that have been killed in this war. And even if we're saying, okay, 600, 700, 800,000 dead Ukrainians, okay, so what? From the Russian point of view, we have still lost a large number of people in order to effect our will in regards to the military campaign. We're not for Minsk 3, we're not for a ceasefire, we are for into this war, full stop. And to make that clear, why would we want a ceasefire when we are in a situation where A, we are liberating Kursk. Kursk is a route. It's a route. I can show you videos of dead Ukrainians laying on the battlefield where they have been fundamentally destroyed. Within a few days, Kursk will be fully liberated. Now, I know Syrsky, Ukrainian commander, is putting out these farcical comments of, we're repositioning and we're still under control. We're not being surrounded. That is like Alice in Wonderland. It is a fantasy written by a child. The reality on the ground is they are being routed. And in a couple of days, what I'm saying will be validated when Ukraine is pushed out of Kursk entirely, or everybody in there dies. That is brutal, but it is true. So why would the military that is moving relentlessly westward want a ceasefire? What is in it for them? Why would they do that? They are winning on the battlefield. Ukrainian people are deserting. Many are being captured. The rest are being killed. That is the situation on the ground. So from the Russian point of view, like Captain America would say, we can do this all day. We can do this all week. We can do this for the next year. Your military will collapse. It is clear your military will collapse. When you've gotten to the point where you're bringing in the Nazi youth to your military, something has gone fundamentally wrong. So from the Russian point of view, why on earth will we accept a ceasefire? Your people are going to die. You will either die or surrender. There is no two ways about it. That's the Russian point of view. Don't take my word for it. Putin has said effectively the same thing in 2024. And this has been reinvigorated by statements coming out of Russia after this meeting. Trump sends his people, Rubio, Waltz, Witkoff, to have meetings with Ukrainians. And again, this is an odd meeting. There are proxies. We talk to them all the time. We can pick up the phone and call Zelensky any day of the week, twice on Sundays, and tell them what we want. So it is a bit weird that we decide to have this formal delegation with the Ukrainians. But whatever. In Jeddah, we have this formal delegation. We go, they talk. They talk for several hours. Waltz and Rubio comes out of the meeting and says, that's the darndest things.
And the Ukrainians have agreed to that proposal. They're ready for peace. And now we'll take that to the Russians and get their response. President may.
Now, initially, if you remember, Zelensky was like, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a peace deal. I don't want any of that stuff. So from Trump's point of view, I bent Zelensky into form in order to accept a ceasefire and to accept the mineral deal. Rubio follows up on Mike Waltz's comments with this.
We're going to tell them this is what's on the table. We're going to take the offer to them. We're going to tell them this is what's on the table. Ukraine is ready to stop shooting and start talking. And now it'll be up to them to say yes or no. I hope they're going to say yes. And if they do, then I think we made great progress. If they say no, then we'll unfortunately know what the impediment is to peace here. The best goodwill gesture the Russians can provide is to say yes to the offer that the Ukrainians have made to stop the shooting, to stop the fighting, and get to the table. If they do that, that's the best goodwill sign we could see. Obviously, as part of that negotiation, as we're talking about how to end this conflict, there will be a lot of issues to unravel. Among them, not the least of which is the humanitarian concerns, the children, the prisoners of war, all the things that sadly come with these conflicts. But the number one goodwill gesture we could see from the Russians is to see the Ukrainian offer and reciprocate it with a yes.
Just think, this man who cares about the babies, the kids. We need to stop this in order to protect the babies. Same guy, perfectly fine with murdering as many kids as possible in Israel. Rubio, that guy. The notion that he cares about the babies, cares about the kids, is nonsense. Rubio is perfectly fine with murdering every Palestinian child that's out there. So don't give me this nonsense about the kids. More kids have died in Israel over the course of the year than have died in Russia over the course of 3 years. So give me this nonsense about the kids. Rubio is posturing. Mike Waltz is posturing. They have no capacity, no capability of changing anything on the ground in Ukraine. And asking for ceasefire is only there in order to potentially build up Ukraine once again so this nonsense can continue. Russia's not going to do that. There's no point in them doing that. The U.S. has no capacity to cajole, push, or motivate Russia to do any of this stuff. So what you're seeing here is posturing. No more, no less. Posturing. Men in suits saying things that don't ultimately matter. This is what's called a dead letter. Dead letter. The moment that the letter is created, the letter has been extinguished. Whatever is coming out of that letter ultimately doesn't matter. It is a dead letter. You had this event for ultimately no real good reason. That's not entirely true. The purpose for the event was to create a pressure campaign against the Russians. A pressure campaign that in no way has any capability of doing what the pressure campaign wants to do. Because in reality, Russia doesn't care. You've lost all political goodwill. You've lost the war on the ground. And the team that loses the war does not get to choose a ceasefire unless there's something that is offered to that side where they will be willing to do so. There is nothing offered to the Russians that would allow them or will make them want them or even care about this. Also, what seems to be happening is everybody has gotten on the same page. So Rubio comes out. Today was a good day for peace, thanks to POTUS, the leadership under the gracious hospitality of Crown Prince MBS. We're one step closer to restoring durable peace for Ukraine. The ball is now in Russia's court. You move to Emmanuel Macron, and you notice the ball is now in Russia's court. Kala Kalis, sexy as hell. Yes, my guy. The ball is in Russia's court. Ursula von der Leyen, not sexy as hell. The ball is in Russia's court. What do you notice about all of these world leaders and the things that these world leaders are saying? The ball is in Russia's court. So all of them are now, despite the break in the transatlantic relationship, all of them are now apparently on the same page. The ball is in Russia's court. Here's the rub. The ball was always in Russia's court. Because again, you have no capacity to do anything on the ground to change the context of events. And to make that even clearer, you've passed every economic sanction that you could come up with. You went after oil and gas. You've tried to isolate Russia. None of those things have worked. Meaning you've shot your load. You've done any and everything possible in your power to change the context of events in regards to Ukraine, and none of it has worked. And now you decide to have a negotiation with your proxy, with your ally that is out there fighting and dying, and come up with, let's have a ceasefire. This was a pointless endeavor. It was a pointless endeavor. If your objective was to get Ukraine on board for a ceasefire, congratulations, you did that. Your problem is that the Russian military is routing the Ukrainian military right now in Kursk. And within a few days, Kursk would be liberated. And after Kursk is liberated, those same Russian forces will keep going out of Kursk, creating a new offensive front into Ukraine and follow them, if indeed they can even go back. Because at this point, there's reporting that these people are surrounded, that thousands of Ukrainians are cut off from leadership or command in Ukraine and are stuck. And if not stuck, one pathway out that is under fire control. This would be a major psychological blow to Ukraine and to the Western world. And I hope to those idiot generals on CNN that thought this was fantastic, that they decided to use their best people to invade Kursk. And those best people were slaughtered. Dead letter meeting. Dead letter meeting. I am not going to jump to the conclusion that many people on social media are jumping to the conclusion. There's a lot of cynicism, realistic cynicism. And what I mean by that is, look, if we lived in a world where things worked, where people didn't suffer, where people didn't struggle, the point of view of people would be oriented to that world. And that cynicism wouldn't necessarily be a part of that world, because from their point of view, the events that's coming through their reality space will be informed, or their point of view will be informed by those events, and those events turning out well. We don't live in that world. We live in a world that doesn't work well, where people die, where life doesn't seem to matter all that much, and where politicians lie often. And so when Trump comes in and makes moves in a particular direction, people are surprised. They're surprised because they are informed by a certain amount of cynicism that they take from reality. It's a feedback mechanism. I'm going to be open-minded on this. And I'm going to take the position that this is an open salvo, that Trump ultimately probably does want a ceasefire. But what he needs to reconcile is that Russia has been lied to over and over and over again. When they say, hey, we're going to do the Minsk agreements, and then they're not attended to, what is the point of view that you get from that? When you go into the Istanbul agreements and you get the West telling Zelensky not to attend to those agreements, what is the point of view that you come away with? When you have all of these missile agreements and these things are washed away, what is the point of view that you come away with? When in 2014, a Ukraine that is supposed to be neutral is overthrown by the US government and used as a proxy in order to kill ethnic Russian Ukrainians in the Donbass region and build up a military on the border, with all of these talks about Ukraine being in NATO, a country that was supposed to be neutral, what is the point of view that you come away with? I'm making the point that you are not regarded as a truthful actor. And you're not regarded as a truthful actor for the things that you have done. That is not, cynicism unfounded by reality. That is cynicism founded by reality. So no, you're not going to get a ceasefire. No, any negotiation that takes place with the Russians will take place as the Russians continue their inexorable stride westward. They are going to kill, they're going to maim, and they're going to take territory up until the point where you come to an agreement to stop them from doing so. That agreement will not be a ceasefire. That agreement will be a lasting agreement that is effectively a new security architecture of Europe. That is all you get. If you do not want to do that, fair enough, then the Russians keep moving and the Ukrainian military will collapse. That is what's on the table. That is all that's what's on the table. As Trump pointed out, you have no chips. If Donald Trump wants to make an agreement that is larger than the Ukraine war, he can do that. In which case, the Ukraine war becomes one item on the table, not the item. If the Ukraine war is the item, then you have no chips. The US has no chips. Nobody has any of the chips other than the Russian military that's going to keep going. Unless you want the Russian military to kill and slaughter to the border of Poland, then you will make a deal. And I would wager to you that that is the last thing that Europe wants. I would even wager to you that is the last thing that the Russians want. Because all things being equal, there is a point in which they don't want to go further. In which case, a deal is on the table, but not like this. This. And these two goofballs will get you nowhere. This language will get you nowhere. It's either all or it's nothing. And the Russians are willing to accept nothing because you cannot stop them on the battlefield. That is your issue. That is your issue. So yes, I'm starting on this. And no, I'm not going to be hyperbolic in the way that I talk about it. I'm not going to be hyperbolic in my take on what I think Donald Trump is doing right now. A lot of people on social media are. There are a lot of screaming on social media that we've been betrayed, that Donald Trump has lied. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wait and see. That is going to be my point of view. I'm going to wait and see. Kursk is going to collapse. Give it a week. Give it a few days. The remaining pocket, the remaining few thousands of Ukrainians that have the unfortunate disposition to be in Russian territory, they're going to die, or they're going to leave under heavy fire, with many of them being killed on the way up. That is flat fact true. I cannot show you the videos because they will get rid of this video if I did. But they are all over social media of dead Ukrainians laying out in the forest, missing limbs and everything else. That would be a psychological blow. That would be a severe psychological blow. Why, under those terms, would Russia agree to a ceasefire? Why would they do that? Why would they do that? You and I are in a fight. I'm beating the shit out of you. And you say, hey, can we pause? Why would I pause? Why would I give you breathing room? Why would I give you time to get yourself together in order to fight me? Again, I'm going to win it. I'm going to finish it. You have no capacity to do anything about it. You can bitch, you can moan, you can beg for stop. That is within my disposition to make a choice on that, not yours, which is why this goes nowhere. I'll end it where I began. Dead letter. Dead letter. Complete dead letter. We'll see what happens. Russia has pointed out that they're open to a phone call with Putin in the coming days. And there's even reporting that Trump wants to go to China to hammer out a deal with China as opposed to having the trade or back and forth between those two. So let's, on this channel, my framing, my point of view, this is an opening salvo. That's what I'm going to call it, an opening salvo. It's only the beginning. Don't freak out. Don't panic. Don't scream that Donald Trump is a liar. Well, he is a liar. But don't scream that Trump is making it up. Trump completely lied. Trump doesn't want a deal. Trump was aping with Europe, and he doesn't really want peace. He just wants to maintain the war. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say that Trump is feeling his way, and not just feeling his way, is going through and unraveling years of framing, years of unprovoked war of aggression, years of Russia just wants to take over all of Europe, meaning you had all of Europe and the United States on one single page of thought and language for years. And the new administration that comes in has to undo all of that. If this is the first step from the standpoint of Donald Trump saying, okay, this is my foray into peace, this is my first offer. Okay, well, Russia's not going to accept that offer, but it's an offer. It's your, if you and I are in negotiations, I stake out my point of view in negotiations, and they're going to be as stark and extreme as I can make that position. You will stake out your position, and somewhere along the way, we'll whittle our way to an agreement. I'm going to take this and these two goofballs as Trump's first opening salvo. That's what I'm going to do. Not going to freak out. Not going to panic. Not going to say Trump lied. Not going to do any of it. You will hear a lot of that on social media. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wait and see. That's my take. But my overall take, dead letter. This goes nowhere. The entire point of the ceasefire would only be to allow Ukraine to rebuild and rearm. What is the point of Russia allowing that, especially considering the last agreements on Ukraine that were broken by the West? Opening salvo. That's where I'm going to go with that. And by the way, the fact that all of these European idiots lumped on to this doesn't really mean anything. Europe has no credibility with Russia. And honestly, I would even go so far as to say no credibility with the United States. So them saying, hey, Trump is saying ceasefire. We like that. We like that. We like that. Well, obviously, Europe likes that because they would just want to put more weapons into Ukraine. But again, they have no relevance. They've lost all legitimacy from the standpoint of Russia. And I hate to say it, so it's the United States. That's why I'm saying this doesn't really matter. What can Trump do? Oh, wow, you've turned back on intelligence that might have never been turned off. Oh, wow, you've added weapon support that you have been doing for the last 3 years, 4 years. In fact, even longer, going back to 2014. Oh, wow, you've done these things. You've been doing these things for the last, 10 years. Why would Russia care? Why would it matter? I hope you're getting my point. None of this matters in the grand scheme of things in regards to what's happening on the battlefield. You turning on weapons don't matter. You giving intelligence don't matter. You've been doing it for the last decade. So yeah. I'm going to go to chat first, and then I'm going to go to the next story. We have, by the way, a damn good show for you today. Andre is coming back on the show. Andre was a Ukrainian diplomat. Andre video last time got 75,000 views. I nearly fell out my chair. But he was there during the Maidan coup. He was there working with Zelensky. And so he has a window into the Ukrainian government that I just don't have. And so his analysis and his talking about his own history in that regard is just fascinating. So Andre is coming back. My thought was, if we're having Ukrainian negotiations, we should have somebody from Ukraine to talk about it from their point of view, and for that matter, what Ukraine themselves are thinking about these negotiations and the events that are taking place on the ground. So he will be back to get that analysis. Donald Trump has also gotten into crypto. At the very least, he's gotten the US government into crypto. People in crypto love it. The US is not buying crypto coins. I just want to make that clear. At least from my understanding, where I'm going to have David Tawil come on to discuss it. But what it boils down to is that we've decided as a country under Trump to invest in crypto. Now, on some level, this is a scam because Donald Trump is also in crypto as he is getting the US government into crypto. That is dubious, to put it mildly. Apparently, the crypto that we're getting are from criminals that we have effectively seized, that the United States government is apparently just keeping, and is building up our own stocks of it, I guess, as a new revenue source. I don't know. David Tawil will be on. He is the crypto genius. We used to have him on the show before, dealing with things for crypto. He knows radically more about it than I know about crypto. We are apparently only getting into, I think they call it stablecoin. It is a coin backed by a certain amount of money. I'm not going to lie. I don't know about this. I'm not going to even expand on it. David Tawil will, though. I guarantee you it will be interesting. And considering our government is now heavily invested into it, we should talk about it. The other thing is KJ. China has just had several major conferences that have just ended. And the thing that got me was our government right now is talking about another government shutdown. I think either Thursday or Friday. Will it happen? Who knows? Oftentimes they do this stuff at the last hour. Mike Johnson wants a continuing resolution to go all the way out to the end of the year. Now, this is a bit rich, considering this was something that Republicans didn't necessarily want. So we can't pass a budget. And so what Johnson wants to do is to lock in Biden-era funding levels. Well, under Biden, we're spending like $2 trillion a year, meaning extra on what we were bringing in. So the budget or the deficit was going up like $2 trillion a year. Now, during COVID, that kind of makes sense. We're not in COVID. We're not in COVID. We're $36 trillion in debt. Where does that number go and how far does that number go? Trump is not going to make that better. The last time that Trump was in office, Trump expanded the budget by $9 trillion. I distinctly remember this. The Republicans kept saying, I am not going to put one red cent on my grandchild's future. I'm not going to do it. It is a principled stance for me. Clinton loses. Trump wins. And they increase the budget deficit by $9 trillion. And Trump wants to pass another grotesque tax cut. That tax cut will also impact the budget by trillions of dollars. Even the no tax on tip stuff, which I actually like because it's effectively a tax cut to the middle and poor, but that still will cost trillions of dollars. How far does the deficit go? If we're already at 36 trillion and these guys are going to increase by trillions extra. Now, for all of this talk of we're going to destroy Medicaid, we're going to destroy, or at the very least, handicap Social Security, we're going to destroy all of these government functions in order to find ways to save money because it's waste, fraud, and abuse, blah, 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 blah. $800 billion for Medicaid is not waste, fraud, and abuse. You're just destroying Medicaid. And the notion that you're going to find offsets, it's nonsense. And by the way, even if you did find offsets, that does nothing to the deficit because it's still going up with your offsets because you're using tax cuts or you're using offsets in order to get tax cuts to the rich. If you put in a Republican, they will do Republican things. It just so happens that Democrats are trash. There's no safety anywhere in this situation. Both are horrible. And the sad part about it is that the Democratic Party is worth nothing. What they will do is say Republicans are destroying public safety net, and they will be right. That says nothing about them. I hope you get my point. That says nothing about values. That says nothing about what a particular group stands for, represents. That is purely one group pointing to horrible behavior by another group, as if that makes them angels. It does not. It just means they're pointing to horrible behavior by another group. There's a difference in those things. This is not the Democratic Party coming to some come to Jesus moment where at 3 a.m. between them and their God says, you know what? We fucked up. We need to do something different. We've alienated the public. We need to represent something. We need to stand for something. We used to represent the working class. We were known to represent the working class. That is not what's happening right now. Hakeem Jeffries is trash. And Bernie fucking Sanders, is using all of his political capital once again to effectively drive people into the Democratic Party, believing that is the main and only opposition to Republicans. There has to be something beyond Sanders. It has to be. And for the life of me, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. I want to go to chat real quick. Andre's coming on at 8 o'clock. Matthew, an absolute disgrace. Note that the United States also says children's forcibly taken, so any agreement by Russia would be a concession to that, that they did so. Actually, it wouldn't be. That is stuff that is coming out the Biden administration. And just so the audience knows what he's talking about. If you are fighting a war, and in that war, let's say soldiers, maybe even parents, people were killed. You are the Russian military. You take a particular area in ethnic Russian territory, and there are kids there. What do you do with the kids? It's that. What do you do with the kids? Do you leave those kids into that war zone? Or do you take those kids out of the war zone? And if you take those kids out of the war zone, where do you take them to? How can you take kids in ethnic Russian territory, meaning in Ukraine, to Ukraine when you're fighting Ukraine? So they took those kids out of a war zone. Ukraine says, oh my God, they're stealing kids. The US then pushes the ICC to say, Vladimir Putin is stealing kids. And so we want to have an arrest warrant for Putin. Now, the problem with this is that Ukraine, Russia, the United States, none of these countries are party to the Rome Statute, meaning none of them are under the auspices of the ICC. And the ICC has fundamentally discredited itself over the Iraq war, over the US going into Afghanistan, meaning Afghanistan is party to the Rome Statute. When Afghanistan pointed out the United States has been murdering and killing people, especially with these drones, this is outrageous, the US said, if you come after us, we will attack The Hague. And under the Bush administration, passed legislation for the US military to attack The Hague if any of our soldiers, or for that matter, any of our ally soldiers, are arrested by the criminal court. So it is a bit rich that we are pushing the court to do anything, or we are giving the court any legitimacy, considering we are willing to attack the court under law if indeed they come after our troops. It is a bit rich. Putin wasn't stealing kids. He was taking them off the battlefield because those kids were in danger on the battlefield. So, no, yes, this meeting is somewhat of a disgrace, but no, I'm resisting everything in me in regards to my cynicism on this. I'm giving Trump the benefit of the doubt. I'm assuming that this is an open salvo, and I'm not going to take a hyperbolic take on it. But you're right and you're wrong. I don't think coming to some kind of agreement means that Russia's acquiescing to the nonsense that is coming out of the US. I think what Russia wants is a new security architecture of Europe where they would consider themselves safe. It's just that. And the West, with the lying, the propaganda, all of this nonsense that comes out of their media, they can say whatever they want. Ultimately, what they want is a stable Europe where they don't necessarily feel threatened by a NATO organization that keeps getting closer and closer and closer to their borders. It's just that. If they get that, the world reaches some level of normality. If they don't get that, they will keep killing and shooting up to the border of Poland. And Europe will have a collective shit fit when that hardened, 1 million man modern military is on their border, and that they know that if any fight takes place, they will lose. They would lose. They would lose badly. Super sticker, Black Spock. Black Spock. I love that name, Black Spock. Who's next? Steve Tots, I think. Rate analysis. Remember a few years ago, Rubio was saying Putin has cancer. Now he's begging Russia to stop. I know, right? You know what's funny about that? All of Europe was doing that. All of Europe. They kept saying they're running out of missiles. Russia is a gas station masquerading as a country. This was the stuff that they were saying. Now they're like, we're terrified. We're terrified. Oh my God, we're terrified. They've been killing Ukrainians by hundreds of thousands. We're terrified. Please, US, get involved. Please, help us, help us, help us. That's where they are now. That's not where they were before. Steve Tots, you're absolutely right. What's this one? Faust Mint Dissident. Sometimes it feels like they're bashing the Democrats is like being mad at a shield for blocking. But their job is not to be a shield. It's not. Like, if that's what they think their job is, they're getting it completely wrong. When the Republican Party came out with their, their 2025 document, or when the Republican Party came out with their contract with America, that's not bad. What they wanted was bad. Trash. But it's not bad to put out a statement of values. This is what we represent. This is what we want to do. And you can measure us in regards to our success by whether or not we accomplish these tasks. That is a good thing. That is an acceptable thing. That is a benchmark where you can measure yourself. When I'm looking at a video and I say, well, did that video do well or not? And I say, okay, this video got 75,000 views. That video did well. This video got 200 views. That video did not do well. That is I want to say objective, but there's an algorithm involved, or whatever I use it. That's an objective measurement of how that video did. Why don't politicians have objective measurements of what they do and how they do? And I'm saying, putting out a document saying, this is what we represent, this is what we're trying to do. That is a clear indication of what you're trying to accomplish in the political space. And whether you accomplish it or not is a determining factor or how well you did. They don't do that. They function purely in opposition to whatever Trump is. And I'm saying that didn't work. You've lost twice to the guy who you have organized yourself with as our main objective is to stop Trump. Everything else is subordinate to stopping Trump. You failed. You failed. It's one thing to say we are in total opposition to another person. It's another thing to say our values and the things that we represent and we want to accomplish puts us in opposition to another person. Those are very different things. Those are very, very different things. They may look similar because, oh my God, Donald Trump is destroying Social Security. Donald Trump is destroying Social Security. You're pointing it out. That is not the same thing as having a value set that says you want to expand Social Security and you're working to do so. Those are different. Oh my God, Donald Trump is destroying Medicaid. Okay, that's different than we have a value set where we want to booster, strengthen Medicaid and the medical services in the United States in regards to Medicare for all or something like that. Okay, that is a value set that is in opposition to the destruction of Medicaid. That is very different than just pointing out, oh my God, he's destroying Medicaid. Those are very different things. I'm saying if they believe that their objective is we're just supposed to be a shield, they got that wrong. You are supposed to make gains. If there was a war, believe it or not, the Democratic Party will represent one side of that war. Republican Party will represent another side of that war. Both will raise their militaries and they will have a fight over who's going to run the roost. We have devolved that heightened state of war into the political space, into political parties that supposed to be working towards objectives and the things they want to accomplish. Just like in a war, well, both sides have objectives that they want to accomplish. I hope you get my point. In two militaries, they're trying to move. They're trying to gain space. They're trying to affect their will in the political space. Under normal circumstances, in a war, you would try to affect your will in order to basically kill the enemy, where you now have full control over the battlefield and, for that matter, the political space to dictate what you want to take place. Take the war out. devolve it into political parties. And those political parties have various rules by which they fight within the context of those rules in order to make gains in regard to their priorities. They just haven't gotten to the point of a war. If one of the political parties said, we are just going to take over the country, the other political party would be willing to go to war to stop them, because ultimately these political parties represent warring sides. We have just gotten to the point of using it politically, not militarily. If indeed I am right, which I am, political parties are supposed to make gains on their priorities. That is the point of people voting for them. That is the point of people pushing for them to move and do things. So no, there are times where they're supposed to hold the line because the other party has more political might. But your goal is to expand your political reach and to push your political objectives. I'll give you another one. Civil rights. Civil rights was somewhat of a war that was taking place in a political space in the United States. The Democratic Party lumped in with African Americans and took on this idea of, we're going to represent gays, blacks, we're going to represent all of these minority groups. Great. They won on that issue. They won on that issue. They've started to go too far because they've filled themselves with their success. But this country is fundamentally different. They won on that issue, on gays and on blacks. I'm saying that the same thing will be true for Medicare for all. The same thing will be true for expanding Social Security. The same thing will be true for increasing minimum wages. These are all battle lines that political parties take, and all things being equal, try to expand on every bit as much as Republicans try to expand on the issue of tax cuts or the issue of destroying the governmental services that the Democrats are trying to try to create. It is not enough to be a shield. It's not. Standing still is death. You need to move. And I'm saying they are fucking that up. They're screwing that up. My guest is coming soon, so I can't necessarily get into it for another topic, but I will point out this, speaking of Democrats. Listen to Senator Elise Stefanik, I believe her name is. I'm fascinated by this comment, and you will be too. Once again, we're going back to The View, the ladies of The View.
Right. I think there's a feeling in the country. Yeah. I mean, I often say this, you know, we're about to turn 250 years old, right? We're still pretty young for a country. These are our like our angry teenage years, right? We are going through this push and pull where we're happy, we're sad, we want this, we want that. And what do you do when you have a teenager who's threatening themselves and others? You just try to get them through this period alive so that their brain can fully form and you can come back to kind of what
Are
a
you talking
country.
about Trump?
No, I'm talking about our country. We're pendulum swinging. We're pendulum swinging. And so for me, I think that I don't think there's a single American who feels like this is normal.
I'm always amazed at the way they see this stuff. She's not wrong. It is a pendulum, but I think she needs to ask, why is it a pendulum? Back in the 50 years, up until the point of Bill Clinton, Democrats in the House of Representatives won 48, I believe, of those years, something like that. Like Republicans only won twice in like 50 years, up until the point of Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton takes over and it becomes a pendulum. House of Representatives goes back and forth. It teeter-totters. Why? Is there anybody in the Democratic Party that looks at that and says, hey, that's weird. Why did that happen? Why are we teeter-tottering? Why are we going back and forth? The obvious answer, just on the top of my head, is the public is unhappy. The public is not satisfied. They put it in one party. They don't get what they want. So they leave that party in order to punish that party. They go to the other. The other party doesn't give them what they want. So they go back to the other party. Meaning, there is no happiness anywhere in this process. I will tell you this. When I was married, I always felt like there was constant obligations. Constant obligations. There was always things that you didn't want to do, but that you felt like you needed to do because you were married. By the same token, when you're single, there are things that you may want that you don't get that you had in America. There's no happiness to be found anywhere. You're stuck, right? Just like a human being. Or at the very least, some human beings. I would imagine some human beings like being married, or some human beings like being single. But there's some people, like me, there's no happiness to be found anywhere in either of these processes. I'm saying the American public is stuck there. They're slashing back and forth. It's not that their brains aren't fully formed. They have ideas on what they want. You just, and your party, just doesn't give it to them. It's just that. And so they end up going to the Republican Party. And then when they realize the Republican Party is not going to give it to them either, they end up slashing back to the Democratic Party. Or the Republican Party does something like, destroy Medicaid, in which case those people come back to Democrats in order to fix and repair Medicaid. You don't give them what they want. Slatkin. It's not that their brains aren't fully formed. It's not that they're children. It's not that, they're going through a rebellious stage. You're out of your mind if you think that. This is some of the most degenerate analysis that a person who is in Congress can give when they are infantilizing the American public just because you lost. You lost. And your response to that loss is, well, Americans are children. Their brains aren't fully formed. They're infants. They're not infants because you lost. You were just not a viable option to choose. There's a difference in those things. Yeah, we used to have people at the barbershop when they were playing chess, and they would lose the game, and they was like, the sun was in my eye, somebody farted, a piece of hair flew from across the room and got into my eye, and I couldn't see the board at that moment. And, he made a move, and I couldn't see it, and I lost. So it's not really my fault that I lost. There are these other factors in reality that got involved that made me lose this game. That's her. That's locking. Hair flew into my eye. Hair flew into my eye. Somebody farted, and I missed the move. Oh, the stench was unbearable, and I just couldn't move the piece in a way that I would typically move the piece to my success. Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here. You lost. And given this take of Americans are infants, doesn't really help your case, nor does it make people amenable to your side. Yeah, these goofy women at The View would accept that.
We are going through,
they'll sit there and laugh and giggle it up because these people are somewhat insulated. Whoopi Goldberg sitting over there, the dark spot in the room, screaming that she's a working girl and she's shutting her vagina off to all of the men that apparently are chomping at the bit to get into Whoopi Goldberg's vagina. You guys can have that conversation. All of you are millionaires. All of you are intact. And all of you fundamentally miss why the American public, the working class, chose different. Slotkin saying this nonsense does not help it in the least. Doesn't help it in the least. Whoopi Goldberg, I'm a working person. I'm a working person. I don't know why you say that, I'm somehow different than the person who's making $10 an hour. I'm a working person too. Whoopi Goldberg is millions of dollars to sit there and run her mouth. Don't give me this nonsense that you're a working person. None of you are working persons in the traditional sense of the word. Most people work 8, 9 hours a day. Most people have to deal with kids, house notes, and most people are fundamentally insecure in a way that you ladies are not. Stop going with this nonsense. These stupid liberals who say stupid shit like this without any real recognition or understanding the lives of regular people and why those regular people will go and vote for somebody like Trump. You are missing the boat. You're in a bubble. Even the things that Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar would say, it's rather astonishing. I love the fact when Stephen A. Smith was there and he pointed out, that is what you say, that is not what your party does. And it is a fact that it's not what your party does for the exact reason why you lose and why you continues to lose. You lost to Donald Trump. You lost to a man that tried to literally overthrow the government of the United States. How do you lose to that guy? How do you lose to that guy? And then you spend 3 years trying to shoot him, trying to put him in a cage, trying to Hitler, he's a fascist, all of this stuff. And you still lose. And at no point did you come to this, we need to come to Jesus. We need to come to Jesus. We need to walk down the aisle. We need to throw our bodies on the floor and repent. We need people screaming, shame, 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 and throwing bananas and tomatoes and shit at us. That's what we need. We need that. That is the thing that we need to do to the American public to get across. We acknowledge our failures. We acknowledge our wrongs. We will be something different. And here's our mission 225 that we are going to do and we are going to pursue. That's what's needed. That's not what we're getting. We're getting liberals that are continuously self-righteous and will sit on the show and say Americans are infants. That's the reason why they voted for Donald Trump. Outrageous. One last point. Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders. I have been greatly disheartened with Bernie Sanders. I've been greatly disheartened with Bernie Sanders. And I say this as somebody that deep down have a sweet spot for the guy. That does not stop me from putting a knife in. I have a sweet spot for him because for all intents and purposes, Sanders was my political awakening. Sanders was the guy where I was like, up. I remember being at work, being the only Bernie supporter in an office full of liberals. And I remember sitting in a meeting one day and I was listening to all of these guys talk about, we have a product. Nobody wants to buy our product. So we have an idea. Let's increase the price of the normal thing and let's just add a product to it so the public can't see that they're paying for a thing that nobody wanted. I'm sitting in a meeting, I'm like, wait a minute. Is that fair? Is that right? And they're like, who is the socialist in this meeting room? Who's saying this? Now the boss, who wasn't paying attention, pops his head up like, wait a minute, I don't want to cheat people. All of them are liberals, by the way. When Sanders was running in the race, I was a vocal Bernie supporter. Everybody knew I was a vocal Bernie supporter. And during the race between Clinton and Trump, I was like, you all are going to lose. Nope. Impossible. Clinton is going to win by 300 votes. That's what's going to happen. And you, Bernie supporter, just need to accept that. Clinton lost. And all of them looked at me like we just had bad sex. Have you ever had bad sex? Where, you wake up that morning and you can't even look at each other. It's just like, she goes to brush her teeth. You go downstairs. It was that. They're in a bubble. Sanders is sitting here and he is going to channel a lot of energy. The reason he's going to channel a lot of energy is because he is right. Under normal circumstances, when he's saying economic populism, he tends to be right. Increase Social Security, increase Medicare. We need a party of the working class. We need people who would go to bat for the working class. That's what we need. And the public is like, yes, this is what we've been missing. This is what we need. Sanders calls himself a socialist, but really he's just an FDR guy. He's like a New Deal Democrat. That's what the public wants. That's my argument. If indeed that is what the public wants, when he goes out and has rallies, the public hears that and they're like, yes, we like that guy. When Sanders goes on Fox News and he makes his pitch and Fox is shocked that the public loves the guy. When he goes to churches, when he goes all around the world, when he goes into Republican territory, and they're like, whoa, this is what we've been missing. We like this guy. Great. But then what do you do with that energy? Is the issue. It's almost like a magical amulet that you've charged with all of this political energy. What do you do with it? The problem is that Sanders then turns around and says, hey, Democrats, here's all of the energy that I've accumulated over the years. Have at it. Effectively sheepdogging all of those people and all of that energy into a party that in no way believes any of those things. And the same party that took every measure possible to put a knife in that fucking Bernie Sanders. There has to be something beyond Sanders. There has to be. If you ask me what it is, I have no idea. I'm going to be asking my guests as they come on, what happens beyond Sanders? I asked Dr. Wormley on yesterday. I don't think he had a full answer for it. I think his thing was where I was. I have no idea what that looks like in a political space. Sanders, for the longest time, has been the furthest in our political space that you could effectively get. Now, people like me, I would be like, the government should own railways, electricity grids. We should own that stuff. That stuff should be in our purview. Buses should be free. Public transportation should be free. It should be well maintained. But that's me, though. and further to the left than most. Sanders is probably as further as you can get in the political space. And so when people ask the question, what's beyond Bernie? I don't think people have an answer for that question. My issue with Sanders, more than anything else, more than the war, maybe not more than the war, maybe equal to the war, the fact that he's a warmonger, he's pushing for the Ukraine war to continue, has more to do with this idea that at some point there will be an election. And when we have that election, what is Sanders going to do? What Sanders has done for the last several terms is Joe Biden is the next FDR. We must vote for Hillary Clinton. And he would stand there and get booed for over a minute for saying so, and yet he would say so on one stage after the next. I'm saying that is a problem that needs to change, considering the party that you have at your disposal right now is a broken, impotent instrument that is not good for anybody. It is not going to be a shield, let alone a sword. Something needs to fundamentally change. Sanders pushing a bunch of people into the party, it's just unhelpful. This is him having a speech or having a conversation with a guy. And I want you to hear what he says here. And I want to get your take on whether or not Sanders is right.
But there was also like there was a gravity in your voice and a sense that in a way that I maybe hadn't heard before. I don't know if you agree with that.
These are, the scariest times in my lifetime. That's all. I mean, I think that's objectively the truth. It is not just they want to get.
Sanders, just stop for a moment, was alive during the Second World War. Bernie Sanders was alive as Hitler was rummaging the earth. And yet, his take is, this is the most dangerous time alive. Sanders was alive during the Cuban Missile Crisis, where many people in the US thought the world was about to end. Put that in context. And yet, Sanders says, this is one of the most dangerous moment to be alive in his lifetime, right now. Okay, let's let him finish.
Give tax breaks to billionaires and cut programs for working people. Frankly, that's happened before.
Yeah.
But you combine that with the power of the oligarchy in general. You combine that with Mr. Musk owning Twitter and able to send out his messages to hundreds of millions of people. You combine that with the fact that people like Bezos, the second wealthiest person in the country, fired or got rid of most of his editorial staff and is going to convert him into a right-wing thing. Combine that with the fact that Trump is suing major media outlets and is threatening to investigate PBS and NPR. So it's not only the power of money, it's also combined with that, the movement toward authoritarianism.
Look, I accept that. And I guess this is the most frustrating thing about Sanders. It's not that I think he's entirely wrong about Trump on those things. Trump is problematic on so many levels. Just because, the devil does something right doesn't mean the devil is not the devil. Fair enough. And no, I'm not normalizing Trump in the sense. I'm trying to point out that Trump didn't get elected by magic. This wasn't a situation where the American public, given legitimate options, would have chosen Trump. I'm saying that Trump is here, and there needs to be an analysis on some level of why. That's my point. That's my point. And that seems to be the thing that Sanders misses. The opposition, if it can't beat Trump, then what is the point of that opposition? And is there something inherently wrong with that opposition if indeed they got beat by Trump twice? It's just absurd. I love the guy, but I hate the guy. Andre, man, welcome to the show. You doing okay this morning?
Good morning, Jamal. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, doing fine. Watching the developments as always. Always interesting.
Andrei Telizhenko, he is a Ukrainian whistleblower, former diplomat, a good friend of the show, actually. You've been with me for a while, and I really appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure.
I watched these negotiations, and I got to be honest, I didn't fully understand why the U.S. would need to have formal negotiations with Ukraine. And I guess for my take, I looked at it as, okay, Trump is devolving these negotiations with Ukraine after the meeting with Zelensky and making it more formal in the way that he's engaging with Ukraine. Then they come out with ceasefire. The ceasefire is dead on arrival. There's no situation where the ceasefire was going to be accepted. Putin said it was going to be accepted. Lavrov said it was going to be accepted. Peskov says it was going to be accepted. And now you've just had a person from the Russian Duma say, ceasefire is not going to be accepted. We are only in this for a sustainable peace and a real deal. We've done Minsk 1 and 2. We've done the Istanbul agreements. We've had all of these missile treaty agreements. Hell, even the overthrow of the Ukrainian government, a government that was supposed to be neutral. All of these things were betrayals. So why on earth will we accept a ceasefire? I brought you on because I was curious about the take of Ukrainians on all of these developments that are taking place, the moves that Trump has been making, this negotiation, the negotiation that's supposed to take place with Putin. What are Ukrainians thinking about all of this as this kind of unfolds and we move forward on this?
Yeah, it's as you said, a lot of betrayals were happening before all this. There was agreements on the Minsk Accords, Minsk 1, Minsk 2. They were ratified in the United Nations by Ukraine itself, signed by Poroshenko, the former president. And then when, after 2022, Merkel and France signed it, Germany signed it, they were the ones who were negotiating those peace deals in Minsk. And then they come out years later saying, oh, it was just like a cloud, smoke cloud, just to get you guys off, and we wanted to arm Ukraine more and more. So this is like, it was just obvious that this was happening. The West was trying to make this war happen, especially the deep state, the globalists, the European Union today. And so was the Istanbul Accords, when Ukraine could have had peace, it didn't get it. So like with Boris Johnson coming there. So this is all obvious facts. Like this is just the recent ones. And what we see today is, I think the ceasefire is not good for Ukrainians, because more Ukrainians are going to die. After, even if it ever happens, not today, but tomorrow they will, because Ukraine will eventually rearm itself, because U.S. continued the flow of weapons. If it's not like the U.S. stopped the flow of weapons, stopped the flow of intel information to the Ukrainian government, the Kiev regime, and they said, we're going to have a ceasefire, then, yeah, it looks like it may be possible. Just everybody calm down. Nothing's happening. But here, no. We have a ceasefire. We're going to rearm Ukraine again. They're going to regroup because the Russians are kicking their ass all over the place. Everybody's dying in millions and thousands of people every day. Like Kursk region, Ukraine lost within the last 6 months more than 66,000. 66,000 men were killed just in Kursk region. And I'm saying this is like a 40 kilometer to 11 kilometer in wide and 11 kilometer depth part. It's not like the whole Kursk region. I'm saying it's a small part. And the whole other front region, it's over 1 million people dead. And this is just for what? Nothing. To continue the more men are going back. So this is how I see it. This is the wrong situation for everybody. Wrong for Russia, because first of all, it's not going to accept it. And it was a setup. A setup because why? You don't talk to the loser in this situation, which Ukraine is, and then you don't dictate its terms. You talk to how it all started. Russia, United States, they agree upon the situation, and then they move it forward. Yes, the Europeans didn't agree with it because they wanted war. Why do Europeans today agree? Ursula von der Leyen, everybody, like Boris Johnson, sprung out of his garbage can and saying, oh yes, this is great. We're going to continue war. I'm going to make more money. Because they need this. They understand that Russia's not going to accept it. There's going to be a continuation of war. They were afraid when America and Russia were talking, because then they understood then it could be made a deal that could have stopped this war completely. Right. And right now, Trump is being dragged into this, I think, by his own team around him that or sold off or don't understand or whatever, but they are not. This is not for good peace terms. This is being dragged in what Trump promised to stop, and now without a ceasefire, but promised to stop a war. This proposition with a losing side, which is being basically destroyed in Kursk. Ukraine is retreating very fast from Kursk right now.
They've been
right at this moment, They're agreeing on a peace deal. Of course, they're going to agree on because they're being destroyed completely. What Zelensky thought it was a card in his pocket, he lost that one completely. Even though it wasn't a card, he thought it was a card, but it was not even a card for him. It was a Uno card in a poker game, so it didn't mean anything. But I'm just saying, even that was lost. So this peace negotiation that happened yesterday in the Saudi Arabia is going to lead to more deaths. Even if Russia agrees on this, Ukraine is going to rearm. I'm just saying the best scenario. Russia's not going to agree on this, but the best scenario. Even if they do, even if it happens, America's still giving arms to Ukraine, the ones that Biden signed off to. It's about $3.5 billion worth of arms. That's quite a lot. Ukraine is selling half of it to the cartels, the Syrians. Last night, the Russian army just with ballistic missiles hit a couple of tankers that eventually were selling grain to Syria, but they were selling weapons to Syria. So a huge explosion. And in Odessa, it was all over the news. So this is what Ukraine is doing. Half of those weapons are going to be sold off, but it's going to rearm and more people are going to die. What for? What is this negotiation going to do to? Nothing. You have to decide between the big actors. If it's a business deal, the big companies decide. You don't have a small medium business owner coming into the negotiations between Microsoft and IBM, for example, or Apple and Google. You're not going to have some small local business come in and say, "Oh, we're going to also put our terms in this. That's how you're going to buy me off, or how you're going to sell me off, or how you're going to save my company." No, it's happening between two big companies. So this is the wrong deal, the wrong terms. Not just because I don't want any ceasefire stoppage. I want it, but I want it to without more deaths because I understand this is going to lead to more people dying in my country.
So I'm trying to take the position that this is Trump's opening offer. I'm trying. I am resisting every bit of cynicism in me to just accept. Okay, this is the first, let's say, opening deal that Trump is offering, which is going to get ignored. Russia's not going to accept this. Supposedly, a conversation between Putin and Trump is coming up, or at the very least, Russia said they're open to a conversation between Trump and Putin. I don't know when that's going to take place or if that's going to take place. I agree with you that I don't see the point in a ceasefire to allow Ukraine to rearm and them to redo this again, nor is Russia going to accept that, considering they're pushing on all fronts, including closing the Kursk pocket. They've entered Sudzha, I believe they call it Sudzha. Sudzha, thank you. And that pocket is going to close within a few days or within a week. They're being routed. And so Russia has no interest. In fact, I can show you the clip where Putin is effectively saying, I'm not accepting a ceasefire. The only deal I'm going to accept is for effectively security guarantees. We're going to end this war, and we're going to end this war in a legalistic way that is long lasting. That's what I want. So whatever Trump is saying here, I'm assuming this is the first offer that is going to be rebuffed. I'm curious, are there any actors in Ukraine, political actors in Ukraine, that will be willing to make peace? And I mean a lasting peace, not this nonsense dead letter ceasefire, but that we're willing to come to the table and say, this war's over with. We are willing to accept neutrality. We're willing to accept not being part of NATO. Does that exist in Ukraine currently?
I have been getting that question a lot on a lot of private channels through friends in Washington and that I still talk to, and people who want to understand what is happening. I'm going to repeat this again. No. There might be some pro-neutral characters. Tymoshenko is being pushed up there like one of those who had deals with Russia before, and now she can re-enter the game again. She has a weak team. I worked with Tymoshenko personally in 2012. 2011, 2012, I advised her when I came back from Washington. Personally, I advised her team personally, took the Canadian doctors to see her, went with Thomas Malia, the former head of USAID, about working with her team and so-called opposition work to Yanukovych at the time, Ambassador Taft, I did all the international work. So I know what she is, I know who she is, I know when she was in prison, who she was, and after she came out, I know who was around her. She's still, and she wants to be owned by the West, or she partially is, because some of her business money and her husband, who she officially is not with, has everything in from Czech Republic ending with the United States. So they're owned. So this is like a neutral character, more neutral than anybody else in Ukraine politics. Everybody, but mostly, and everybody else compared even to her, and even her, they're all owned by the West. Klitschko is a German citizen. Vitaly Klitschko, the mayor of Kiev, the boxer, he's a German citizen with his brother. His wife lives in Hamburg. Just like what Poroshenko was pushed in by the Biden administration. Susan Rice, he's a business partner of Biden through Burisma. That's Poroshenko. You have other characters like Arestovich, who's trying to play the opposition. He's owned by Lovichkin, Sergei Lovichkin, who basically sold off the Maidan to the West, provoked the provocations on Maidan, and sold it off to Yanukovych to the West, and got a protection umbrella by Newman. So this is there's nobody. Yeah,
Arestovich, real quick. You're right. He's been very vocal and critical of Zelensky. I mean, Arestovich went so far as to say Zelensky needs to be in a cage, jail cell, and that they would prosecute him at the end of the war. What chances would Arestovich have? Like, is he a popular figure in Ukraine? Does he have any political support?
People listen to him, but people understand that something is wrong. The problem is that he is financed by the person who's under umbrella of Newman and the CIA. He's not an independent character. He's a controlled opposition by Zelensky. So, from my stand, is Dubinsky, who is in a jail cell, tweeting negative stuff about Zelensky. He's going on air and talking about Zelensky. I'm talking about Alexander Dubinsky, who's the member of parliament. And people who are in jail cells for political crimes, they get beaten up. Like even Kolomoisky, his former boss of Dubinsky, this member of parliament, he's in a jail cell. He cannot tweet or write. Dubinsky can tweet and write because he sold off Kolomoisky to the West, and he sold off to Zelensky. So now nobody's touching him. He can do whatever he wants. Controlled opposition. It's a game. It's a show. It's a show for the West to get you guys thinking that there is opposition in Ukraine. Anybody who speaks out in Ukraine, I had to flee Ukraine. I'm not thank God in a jail cell, but I had to flee because I would be killed. This guy is in a jail cell and he's tweeting. Arestovich, he was part of the team. He was the one who's spreading lies about Russia, saying their rockets are gonna end in 2-3 days. He knew that the war is gonna start. He didn't say no then. He said he wanted to sell off Donetsk and Lugansk to Russia, saying I'm gonna give a bottle of cognac to the Russians when they take it from Ukraine. He never said no. He was the one involved in this. He knew that this has happened. So then at one point he leaves, saying, "Oh, I didn't want this to happen," but he was part of the war. He was in a high government position, advising to the president of Ukraine. He knew stuff, and now he's saying that he's opposition. Total BS. Sorry, a lot of stuff is happening in Ukraine, BS, and it's a play to get everybody. There's a lot of people in the West, especially even the United States government, doesn't understand today what is happening in Ukraine. They're trying to trust people that are there. Anybody that's not in Ukraine are saying we need peace with Russia. Oh, it's pro-Russian, it's toxic. No, this isn't the best scenario that anybody can get. Somebody who wants peace with Russia, directly saying it, and actually is under sanctions and fleeing and doesn't have to be there because he's afraid for his life. Sorry, go back. I'm going to go back to you. I was talking too much. I just want to get my point out because there's a lot of misunderstanding on the real opposition in Ukraine, that there is none. People who are in Ukraine, some people who are not in Ukraine, there are strings attached between all of them and the deep state. That is the biggest problem. Like not within the last 10 years, just recently, like the last couple of years, right when the war started, these people were connected to Zelensky and his regime. And now when they understood that the war is going to be lost, when the agenda for the West was to break up Russia the first 3 months, then they broke up from Zelensky and eventually started their own thing. And that's the biggest problem. And the West is trusting these people. I'm saying, how can you tweet from a jail cell if you're a political prisoner? Everybody else gets beaten up and killed. Somebody is tweeting. How can you come out and leave the country like Arestovich when you're part of the Zelensky team? Now he actually started to criticize him from Ukraine. Nobody would let him out of Ukraine when he started criticizing. He left because he's supported and backed by Lovichkin. So Dubinsky sold off his former boss Kolomoisky. That's why he's being protected, and that's why they've been trying to bring up these people back again. They cannot be trusted. Nobody in Ukraine can be trusted. There's no real politician understand who can be trusted from the Ukrainian side because they're interconnected. The deep state, not just the U.S. government, they're collaborators with the deep state, the intel groups, MI6, CIA, the people who hate Trump, and they want to try to put these people into his pocket to undermine the Trump peace deal with Russia. Even if Zelensky changes, anybody who will come to power, Zaluzhny, Dubinsky, Arestovich, Zelensky if he comes back, whatever, anybody, they're going to undermine Trump's peace deal because they're not going to be independent and sovereign. All these people are owned or have their money in the West.
That is deeply dispiriting.
It is.
I'm glad you put up Dubinsky. I tweeted to him, by the way, because you're right. He's in a jail cell, and yet he's tweeting. And I asked him several questions because I wanted to see if I can get him on for an interview. And he said, look, I can't do in person, but I can do a video interview. He sent me a tweet today, actually. And it was him in a jail cell being forbidden from talking to Trump, effectively saying you are not allowed to speak or send anything to Donald Trump. And that was the point of the tweet, him in a cage being told you're not allowed to do that. Who is Dubinsky? I don't know who he is. And maybe this is my own memory hole. Who is this guy? Why is he relevant?
Look, Dubinsky, I knew him from before in Ukraine. He was the member of parliament from the party of Zelensky. He was the right-hand puppet for Kolomoisky, the oligarch, who was on the wanted list by the FBI. Kolomoisky is in a jail cell, and actually was in a VIP jail cell, but now he's in a worse jail cell, I think with 3 or 4 people, by the Secret Service of Ukraine. He cannot tweet, even though he has the money and the power. This guy, his owner, the oligarch, cannot tweet, but his right-hand puppet can, which is interesting. That's like, and anybody who's in a political case, he's being beat up in the jail cell every day, or he's being tortured or being kept, like, look, Gonzalo Lira, a U.S. citizen. Could he ever tweet? No. He got killed. A great example. This guy is basically torturing and going against Zelensky full scale with insights from somehow how he gets them in a jail cell. Very interesting. And tweeting them out, which is interesting. What he's doing is right. He's saying the truth, the right things. The problem is questions, how can he do that? So he was a part of Kolomoisky, his big team. Kolomoisky who brought Zelensky to power. And then he tried to be involved with Derkach, which he was. Basically, with Derkach, when his tapes were coming out, he was there on his right-hand side with Derkach when the tapes were coming out and all the press conferences. Basically, Derkach took him into his team because Dubinsky was part of Kolomoisky, so Derkach could get air from Kolomoisky's TV channels and support from Kolomoisky. To basically have this guy involved, and Kolomoisky was basically involved in this too, with the Biden-Poroshenko tapes in 2020, 2019, whatever, when it happened. So this was Dubinsky's role. Then he got sanctioned on the same list with me, and he basically went quiet for some time. He stood out this sometimes, but he was mostly like on a mid-level, neutral level. And then when this war starts, he's still quiet, and then he comes out, started criticizing like a year ago or 2 years ago, and he goes to prison. Half a year after he goes to prison, he starts criticizing Zelensky and starts going in there, which is interesting because from my information, he made a deal to sell off his former boss, Kolomoisky, to Americans. From what I don't know if that's true or not, just rumors. I'm just confirming that those are rumors. And that he basically is a puppet for the Zelensky, people within the Zelensky regime. So if something changes and Zelensky has to flee, they'll still have control and power over financial dealings in Ukraine, which the new government, if Dubinsky ever will be part of it or be supported by America in the West, will be brought in and basically put in charge of that. So they can still control those financial, all those taps and wiring, and everything else and assets. Yeah. So this is what it's being done for, not just politics and not just to undermine the peace deals, money, control, money, have their own people in power because those people who cannot show their face right now, because they're more exposed or don't want to show their face, they push people like Dubinsky, like Arestovich out there, like Timoshenko, like Poroshenko, anybody else. So basically, this is the situation what we're talking to.
your point is that there are, let's say, there are monetary interests that are not exposed, but have people as their friends. And Dublinski, Arestovich, these people are representing powerful forces behind the scenes that are effectively their funders and supporters
Yes,
for the
they
Ukraine.
are. They never speak out on their own. They never
It's
can
never
talk
front
personally
people.
on the. And like I come out. I was offered a lot of times to be backed by somebody from different sides, money per month for coming on air, talking points. I talk what I want. Like we don't even discuss the topic we're going to talk about, or we'll always come on. Oh, this news happened. We're going to come on and talk about it. That's how I do it. It might be not my answer is going to be perfect, but that's how I like to express to people what I personally think, and that's why I denied those offers because first of all, that's illegal. Second of all, what I went through, I think, believing that the God gave me a chance to live. I cannot take money from people who have got this war involved in my country, and I want to speak out what I want to speak out. And this is why people are listening, because I'm trying to speak out the truth, and truth in a way that I feel it. Maybe it's not always the right position, or maybe I don't get it to the point, but I use my own analytics to get things out. These people don't. That everybody is getting financed. Arestovich is living in the US. He's being promoted. He has lobbyists. He has advisors. Anything he comes out with, everything's being checked out and done. So there's a big question. Are these people sovereign in their actions? Can they take Ukraine to peace? Can they speak to Trump or Putin and make peace in Ukraine? Big question. That's why I feel a threat to the security of the future, whatever is going to be left of the Ukraine or the country itself. That these people can do the same thing or are going to be the same as Zelensky. Coming out saying one thing at the beginning. Zelensky said the opposite before all this. He said whatever Arestovich and Dubinsky are saying right now. But then he came to power and turned 180 degrees different direction.
Oh, I see. Your point is Zelensky was effectively saying very similar things to Arestovich. I want to make peace. I want to make deals. We should sign Minsk. Why are we fighting the Russians? And then he gets in office and he does 180, and all of a sudden, because of this warmonger who's incapable of making any kind of peace or coming in any kind of terms.
Okay.
Is Zelensky capable of making, for one, who would win the next election? Because there are two things that are happening. Donald Trump, or reporting is that Donald Trump wants Zelensky to leave. Is that even possible? Do you think there's any chance that Zelensky will step down? You know him. You've worked with him. Is there any chance that he would step down in this position?
Thank God I didn't work with him. I just know him. I know the people who financed him during the election. I had lunch with him after he got elected, so I know what he is. And he offered me a couple of job positions, which I denied. He offered me to be deputy head of foreign intelligence, and then there was a talks about getting an ambassadorship in Washington. Thank God I'm not in those positions. Thank God I'm not a part of his team. I don't have blood in my hands. I know a lot of people in Ukraine, but I just known him. He, as I said, he's a bully, very aggressive bully on drugs, as we talked last time. He will not step down easily as Yanukovych did. Yanukovych actually saved Ukraine at that time from full-scale war. Some people think that from his actions. Some people think if he would have stayed, maybe it wouldn't lead to full-scale war. But Zelensky is aggressive. Zelensky thinks he's more right than anybody else. He thinks he's being backed up because he was put up on the pedestal as the top leader of the democratic so-called world. He's being backed by globalists. They're always putting wrong things into his ear, wrong information that everything's okay, everything's good. That I saw documents that are being sent from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine to him, and they're mostly positive. They're not anything negative. They're saying that Ukraine is winning. We have full support of everybody in Europe. And right now, most of Europe fully supports the war in Ukraine.
But he has to know that he's lost the war. Like, meaning,
what is about, for example, he knows that he's lost, but he cannot accept the defeat because he thinks that things can happen. They're waiting for, like, they call it the black swan effect. Черный лебедь in Russian. It's like some miracle is going to happen to Putin, and or something's going to happen. I'm younger, or we're going to live out, or something. We're going to wait this out, and then things Russia are going to collapse. Putin's going to agree on a peace deal that is going to be bad for him, and Russia's going to fall apart. That's what they, not just Zelensky, his advisors, the West, the CIA is waiting for this. They're not. They understand they cannot defeat Russia openly against them, so they're waiting for all these miracles to happen. And I'm serious about this. This is how they think. They don't think strategically because he doesn't think for the country. He doesn't care about Ukraine. Zelensky doesn't care about the people in Ukraine. He doesn't care about anything for his country. He cares about himself, his family, his money. That's it. He doesn't believe in God. He's an atheist, even though he's Jewish. He's an atheist. So completely doesn't believe in God. He doesn't go to synagogue. He doesn't even support this. Second of all, that's why he's doing this to the church in Ukraine, because he doesn't care. And second of all, he cares about the money. He cares about, and he actually said that a couple of years ago. I only care about my family and my children. And that's it. I don't care about anything else. And he actually does believe in that. And there's a problem. People think of him. Oh, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, even though he's illegal, the president of Ukraine. He is not the president. He doesn't think about Ukraine at all. That's the problem. People think that they think about Ukraine. They don't think about themselves. Yermak, Zelensky, his team, they don't think about themselves, their money. Well, you know what they're negotiating there also in the US mostly? Not just for Ukraine, security for themselves. If they're free, so that things will not happen, so they won't get sanctions, their assets won't be frozen, they won't get shot in the head or be hanged like Berezovsky in the shower in London. So that kind of stuff. That's what they're also negotiating for. They're not the country. They don't care about it. If they did, this war would never start, because they would, a sane person understands that he cannot defeat a nuclear nation like Russia, the largest one in the world, actually, not just France, which has 200 nuclear warheads. It doesn't have a full-scale system to actually work it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like Russia. And now he actually, and you can see he cannot negotiate with Russia, because he cannot even negotiate with Trump personally, the person who actually finances him, the person who is responsible for financing Ukraine. He's acting like a bully, an aggressive bully, and doesn't want to. He cannot even negotiate with the person who gives the money. How can he
So there-
negotiate with the person who he psychologically hates or was believed to hate him? Putin.
So
He
he's
cannot.
expecting America at the Vistula, like where this thing happens, where the Russian military collapses, and they're able to make all of these inroads and gains. But he was willing to negotiate the Istanbul agreements. Why? Please.
Yes, sorry, I'm going to have a lot of stuff on my mind. They were ready to negotiate the Istanbul agreements because Ukraine and Kiev was surrounded by the Russian forces. They were not in Kiev. I was in Kiev the first week of the so-called invasion. I didn't see Russian forces inside of Kiev. They were around them, yes, but never one in Kiev. So they were negotiating this to also make this peace deal to reorganize the Ukrainian army and go full force and say, oh, we made a counterattack, and Russian forces stood back, even though they did it on their own, the Russian forces. Nobody pushed them out. They left because the Istanbul agreements were signed, and Russia acknowledged that signature and said, okay, now we're going to leave from Kiev. Zelensky got security guarantees that Putin was not going to kill him. Remember that interview with the former prime minister of Israel, who was in Moscow and said, "Will you kill Zelensky to Putin?" And Putin said, "No, I can give you my word, and you know that my word is solid. I will not kill Zelensky." That prime minister of Israel called Zelensky. That's when Zelensky was secure. And then he did the counterattack, the so-called show to the world that Ukraine is defeating Russia. The Russian forces had to pull out because Ukraine were pushing up. It was a total lie in the show. The same thing. That's why I'm afraid this is going to happen again during this so-called 30-day peace deal or ceasefire, 30, 40-day, 90-day, whatever you can call it. But it's going to happen again. And then Russian forces going to hit harder this time because they were lied again too. So they're going to hit much harder, and people are going to die for this. This is why it cannot happen again and again.
Do you think Zelensky would ever sign a peace deal? Meaning, even if he ran in an election, won that election, do you think he would ever sign a deal to end the war?
No. He only understands force. United States have wanted to stop this war, and the Trump administration, as I said, they would have pulled out all those CIA and foreign intel agencies that are on the Ukrainian soil. Even if the FBI is there, even though they have no big deal to be in Ukraine, they're only national. The FBI isn't even in Ukraine. More than 60 intel agencies are on the Ukrainian soil, controlling the biolabs, Zelensky, everything. Trump has to pull them out and say, Zelensky, now you're on your own, or you sign this, or the radicals that we actually finance are going to kill you. Because the radicals, the neo-Nazis, are fully controlled by the Secret Service of Ukraine, which is fully controlled by the CIA and all those other 16 intel agencies. So if Trump wanted to make Zelensky silent, he would have, by saying you have, or you save your life, or you lose your life, or you save millions of Ukrainians' lives and Russians. This would have been actually what the US do. They don't do this because there's an agenda. I don't think really Trump personally and his family do one piece, knowing what they talked about and knowing what people around him are talking about, like and JFK Jr. and everybody else, RFK Jr. and everybody else. I'm just saying there's a team who are Russophobes around him or were sold off to the military-industrial complex. Because how Trump thinks, he thinks, I have people who I trust around me, they're not going to sell off. But Trump is a billionaire. Most of the people around him are not. A lot of people are, but those around who are actually advising him on foreign affairs are not billionaires, so they can be easily bought off. They're government officials. Politics is very close to corruption and to bribery. So this is what is happening, I believe, here. They're trying to undermine Trump's initiative on a peace deal and selling him out a rotten candy, which is not going to be eaten by anybody, not by the Russians, not even by the Americans, this 30-day so-called peace initiative.
Ceasefire.
It's not peace. They could have made Zelensky sign it. They could have a neutral government agreed upon by Russia and the United States, be put in place in Ukraine, get out of all the US intel agencies that are not letting Ukraine be sovereign because they're controlling all those radicals, they're controlling all those agencies that are all those political cases in Ukraine. 15,000 political cases are in Ukraine and people are in prison by the United Nations information. You get all those CIA, MI6 out of there, all those people are going to be free, and the war is going to, at least Ukrainians can start deciding what they want. They will not be controlled or threatened by foreign from foreign governments like the United States or Britain.
What are just normal, everyday Ukrainians thinking about all of this? I mean, Gallup did a poll and it said that more than 50% was willing to end the war, even if it means giving up territory, the eastern, basically Donbass, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, Crimea, etc. What are they thinking? I mean, because we don't typically get what everyday Ukrainians who are just trying to make a living, go about their life, what they are seeing and what they're considering when they're watching all of this play out.
I myself not in Ukraine. I had to flee because of the threats, but I was put on kill list by the radicals. But I talked to a lot of Ukrainians, even family members of Ukrainians that are in Kiev and around Ukraine, and not only to just even people who I know, and even soldiers who actually support what I talk about. They were pushed to fight. They don't want to fight, but they're on the front lines waiting for peace. And I can tell you that a lot of it's divided right now in Ukraine because the propaganda machine actually works and does its thing. So a lot of people are starting to, after the situation in the Oval Office, people started to back Zelensky up. We're Ukrainians, the Americans own us. Problem is, the propaganda machine works so well that they lifted Ukrainians. That's why everybody's calling Ukraine a Nazi country or fascist country, because lifted its agenda that Ukrainians are higher up anywhere in the world than anybody other nation. That people owe to Ukraine a lot. Russia owes to Ukraine, Belarus, Hungary, United States. Everybody has to give Ukraine money or owe something to Ukraine. So a lot of people start to support Zelensky because, he stood up for Ukraine and we want to continue this war. But a lot of people want peace. And I can tell you a lot, it's over 60% overall with understanding of the situation on the ground. Because I talk to people, those people talk to their neighbors and friends and all over, and they've been telling me what is happening. They want peace. They don't care who's going to be even controlling Ukraine. They understand that the West will not be able to rebuild Ukraine. They understand that the West already was in Ukraine for 10 years. And I'm talking to a lot of people who before did not support my agenda of peace. They didn't understand it. Now they do because they understand Ukraine is falling apart. And they say, we don't care who's going to control Ukraine, who's going to rule Ukraine, Russia or anybody else. The only thing we care is to rebuild and have peace, to get our lives back to normal. Our men cannot go out on the streets. Our men cannot work. A lot of them were sent to the front lines. We want it to be over with, and we don't care. And that's it. That's what we want our lives back. That's what a lot of Ukrainians think. First of all, military. Been talking to the military who are on the front lines, northern part of Kharkiv, and they're saying, first of all, we don't have drones. We send one drone. The Russian forces send 50, 60 drones in return. We send one artillery shell. The Russians send 60 artillery shells in return. We are in our positions. This is the quote from the military, and this guy is he's an officer, high-ranking officer. I'm not going to say who he is. We're a high-ranking officer in his position saying, we are in our positions, not because of our strength. It's because of the Russians are not advancing. If they advance, we're done. So this is what the situation is on the front lines. And he said this is everywhere like this. If the Russian forces would actually start advancing full force, everything would just collapse completely. They're just saving, and they don't want people to die, and they understand that something might change. This is the other side. This is what the soldiers think on the ground. They're saying our government, the regime in Kiev, is killing us and throwing us to the front line. These guys are not even advancing because they understand they can save more lives by maybe negotiating this situation. But if they do advance, and if this peace deal it gets broken within the 30 days by somebody, or Ukraine removes its reorganizes its military, starts advancing somewhere else, a lot of people are going to die. That's what I'm saying, because I have full information from the ground from people I talk to, and I trust those people because I worked with them for a long time before. And this is what the Ukrainians are thinking about this. This has to end. They don't want to be in the West anymore. They understood what the West is. A lot of them fled to Europe. They know what Europe is about. They don't like it. A lot of things here because it's not how things work in Ukraine. Ukraine actually is more advanced, more technological advanced was before. You can even order things online anywhere. If you're in a little village and people are going to deliver food to your house, you can have online banking much easier than in Europe. Like service, doctors, you can get a doctor's appointment within 2 hours, except like in the West, you have to wait 2 months or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So different situation. And people understand what this is all about. They want to live in their own country, and they want to just have a normal life. That's what I'm saying. If a peace deal can be done, Ukrainians can start living a life back together with the Russians. Why I'm saying this? Because historically, we had already civil war in the beginning of the 20th century, when the Russian Empire collapsed. There was a big civil war, more than 10 million dead during that civil war, and still Russians and Ukrainians and those in two nations combined together, lived a peaceful life, and fought the Second World War together and won it. So history repeats itself, and we can get back together, and people understand that also.
Do you think ultimately that this is going to be put back together at the end of the war? That like right now, relations obviously between, especially West Ukraine and East Ukraine, are not necessarily at their best. I mean, these territories that used to be part of East Ukraine are now part of the Russian Federation. When this war ends, and I imagine at some point it will end, do you think that there's going to be, I guess, reconciliation? Do you think they're going to, I mean, I guess your take would be no, if CIA, MI6, and all these other intelligence services remain in the country, agitating in the country itself. But do you think Trump is going to get this peace deal? Let me ask that.
I believe he wants one.
One is different than get. One is different than get.
That's what I'm saying. I believe he wants one, but to get this peace deal, he needs to understand the United States only is controlling what they're giving to Ukraine. Russia's controlling the situation on the ground. The U.S. needs to just do what actually Russia is actually proposing, most of it, because most of it is also going to be good for Ukraine. We're not going to have neo-Nazi, Bandera regime that is going to be killing people around in Ukraine, because it's all going to clear up We're going to get our church back. We're going to get the Russian language back, which is still in the constitution, protected by the Ukrainian constitution. Nobody changed the
And
constitution for
Zelensky
the Russian
speaks
language.
Russian. That's
He
his
speaks
main
Russian.
language.
They all
Yeah.
speak Russian. They all speak Russian. They go on TV saying they speak Ukrainian. They don't. They speak Russian in between themselves. Poroshenko, they swear in Russian. All the soldiers speak Russian. Everybody speaks Russian. So this is, yeah, everybody. It's natural. It's like I'm just saying, it's a natural thing. They go between themselves in Russian. I'm just saying, what Russia is actually proposing is smart because it's going to get peace done in a country where it's divided. Ukraine, there's, as I said, I'm half Russian, half Ukrainian. My mother is Russian. National, my father is Ukrainian. My grandfather is buried in Sevastopol, and my other grandfather is buried in central Ukraine, Cherkasy. And we are interconnected. We're intercombined. And what the West is proposing is only Ukrainization, radical Ukrainization, which is leading to the destruction of Ukraine. The West cannot pull Ukraine off. So that's what Trump needs to understand. He needs to let Ukraine go. Let it be sovereign. Let it be independent. Let it be neutral. And it's going to be okay. It's going to be better than what you're going to send us weapons. For what? For the people who are going to coordinate. The West is going to coordinate the radicals again because they have nobody else to trust. Only the radicals are going to start working with them. Nobody with a peace agenda or peaceful towards Russia agenda is never going to work with Americans on this to continue this war. People who want peace, they're going to acknowledge that we should get back because we were part of Russia for more than 350 years. We were one country. It's like take away Texas right now from the United States and then say, oh, let's you guys, Texas should be Mexican because it was before Mexican, but for the last 200 years it was American. Forget about that. No, it's not going to work. It's going to be a civil war. Part of Texas is going to divide. So this, I don't want this to happen to Ukraine. We already were divided. Let's bring it back together. And Trump needs to understand this. He needs to not listen to whatever people are trying to lure him in with these initiatives of 30-day ceasefire. No, a peace deal done. Talk to Putin. Trump needs to talk to Putin only, and then bring back to Europeans and Ukrainians and talk to them only afterwards, not in between, because this is going to interrupt all the initiatives. What is going to happen? You talk between the big companies. You don't talk to the middleman. Ukraine, unfortunately, is the middleman for the deep state and the globalists. It's not a sovereign, independent country. It lost its sovereignty 10 years ago during Maidan. Unfortunately, I was part of it. Unfortunately, I saw what happened. I'm going to, let's say, pay my dues for this for all my life. But I saw how Ukraine lost it. And I don't want Ukraine to lose it again. I want Ukraine back, its sovereignty and independence back. And you don't talk to these unsovereign people because they're going to undermine everything that is being done by the new administration, and they're going to only lead to more deaths. So, of course, I think Trump is going to get to it one day, hopefully, because otherwise it's going to lead to World War III, or Ukraine is going to be fully taken over with the military by Russia. Ukraine needs to be peaceful with Russia. It needs to be under the Russian umbrella also, because we are decided, like Canada is with America. Nobody's going to Ottawa saying you have to be with Russia because you're close to our northern part border, whatever. No, the same thing with Ukraine. Our history is a great example with Texas. You take it away, you can't. It has to be part of the United States. It has to be there. So, or like, for example, China's going to come in Texas and say, be part of China. We're going to Mexicanize you and Americanize you, and then you're going to be coordinated by Beijing. No, it's not going to work. There's going to be total disaster. It's going to be a total destroyed state within the United States. So this is what I'm talking about. This is how people have to understand. Ukraine, it will be taken over by Russia with force, and a lot of people are going to die, or it can be peacefully working with Russia to rebuild itself, working with the West to rebuild itself, working with Belarus to rebuild itself, with Hungary to rebuild itself, and keep as many lives as possible safe. That's only going to happen when you make a real peace deal, not a ceasefire for 30, 50 days, 60 days, 100 days, whatever. It's not going to work.
Andre, from your mouth to God's ears, thank you for this. Honestly, thank you for this. I really appreciate your take. Andrei Telezhenko, he's a Ukrainian whistleblower and a former diplomat and a good friend of the show. Thank you, my man. Be safe. Have a good one.
God bless. All the best.
Thank you. All right. Really good take by Andre. I'm fascinated by the life that he's lived and what he has gone through. And I'm deeply appreciative that he's willing to join us. Here's another interview that I have been chomping at the bit to have. I am super interested in his take. We're joined with David Twill. David Twill, there we are. David, I have the wrong bio for you, but I'm going to get the correct bio for you. First, I'm going to say welcome to the show. How you doing this morning? You doing okay?
Awesome, Jamal. Great to see you.
Oh man, it's great to see you too. So David Twill is, I'm going to say, crypto genius first and foremost. He has been a friend of the show for a long time, or at the very least, the other iteration of the show. There we are. David Twill is co-founder of ProChain Capital, a multi-strategy crypto asset fund covering the entire ecosystem of the burgeoning asset class. His deep experience in crypto assets, token mining, venture capital, programming, and asset management. There it is. David, I brought you onto the show because the US government under Donald Trump has made the plunge into crypto, made a significant plunge into crypto. Now, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not that the government is buying crypto. Apparently, there were criminal cases, prosecutions, where they were able to seize crypto assets, and it's those assets that we are effectively holding onto. Something about stablecoin, Bitcoin, but I want you to go into it and explain it to the audience because you will do a much better job of explaining it than I would. What is this plunge that I'm understanding that the government is getting involved into crypto? Give the audience a brief summary of what's happening, and we can step into it from there.
Sure. So let's start with what the government already owns, which you alluded to. So we don't get, as citizens, full transparency on everything that the government has in terms of seizures. We don't get an inventory. We don't know how many cars they've repossessed. We don't know how many bank accounts they've frozen and how many billions are in those accounts. I'm sure, with respect to all sorts of governments that we don't agree with, against which there are, actions or, with respect to crimes that have been prosecuted, lots of assets have been seized. However, this is important. However, when it comes to cryptocurrency, it's not that the US government needs to go ahead and divulge that information to us because cryptocurrency is so transparent. Everybody knows the US government's wallet address and therefore knows how much the US government holds. And so the government, as you alluded to, owns a bunch of cryptocurrencies. The overwhelming majority, into the tens of billions of dollars, multiples, is Bitcoin, which is great because Bitcoin is the most valuable cryptocurrency. It's the simplest cryptocurrency in the sense of understanding what it does, effectively nothing. It just stores value. And it is a, stateless asset. So think of it as, I don't know, digital property, digital gold, whatever you want to go ahead and, whatever moniker you want to go ahead and apply to it. Essentially, it is a technology that is scarce. People have already ascribed value to it, and it has no attachment to any particular government. And so therefore, it is not affected by the financial status of any particular government. And that's very important, right? The US dollar strengthens and weakens depending on the financial status of the US government. Now, we don't think much about our status. It's pretty strong. But if you're in a secondary or tertiary or frontier market, tertiary country or frontier market, your currency being strong is certainly not a foregone conclusion. And so therefore, instead of keeping your money in your local Argentine peso, you may prefer to keep it, as a matter of fact, in something that has value and stability. So that, all that being said, we have now, pursuant to executive orders, and this is very important as well, it is not done pursuant, it hasn't been done pursuant to legislative passing of a law. It has been done by executive order, which means that it could get reversed by the next executive. Donald Trump has created two things. First, a Bitcoin strategic reserve that has initially been funded by or populated by the existing Bitcoin that the US government owns, or in other words, we are not going to be sellers. The United States will not be sellers of that Bitcoin. And in addition, he's given his cabinet the charge to go ahead and buy additional Bitcoin as long as it doesn't come at a cost to taxpayers.
Wait, what does that mean? How does the
Oh,
government?
I'll give you an
Yeah,
example.
explain that.
That's what everyone has been speculating about. Well, how does it not come at a cost to taxpayers?
Right.
Let's say the government already owns other assets. Instead of keeping the value in those assets, like the gold in Fort Knox or some other assets that we hold, maybe our oil reserves as well. We have a strategic oil reserve. You know, it could be anything, right? We can talk about the merits of what we should sell and what we should put into Bitcoin and so on. I mean, I believe, frankly, the likelihood over the long term that Bitcoin is going to appreciate by multiples is much greater than the likelihood that gold is going to appreciate by multiples. If you look at the price of gold over the last 10 years, it has not nearly kept pace with the gains in Bitcoin. Now, you and I may disagree on that.
I know, but gold is but oil, gold, those are tangible objects. Bitcoin is not.
You and I need to agree before we start the conversation that Bitcoin has value.
I'm not saying it doesn't have value.
So the fact that it's an intangible asset should not be something that is a challenge. Right? It's a technology.
I know, but assume for the moment that something happens where the electronic system goes down. It goes away.
No. So
it doesn't go away.
It doesn't.
You're saying it's still.
No, it's on a distributed ledger, meaning it is not centralized in one place. Unlike the gold in Fort Knox, which if stolen is gone, right?
Who's stealing the gold from Fort Knox?
I don't know, some very crafty criminal. In contrast, it's not as if the US's Bitcoin sits on a thumb drive or a computer. It exists out on the blockchain. And so it can't be stolen in that way. So as a matter of fact, I have one up on you right now.
But you don't, because gold is a real thing, oil is a real thing, Bitcoin is an ephemeral thing that we just give value to. And look, and we can have this conversation about whether gold has value and the perception and how values are. I'm just putting out that there's a difference between a physical object and the usage of a physical object, meaning I can use oil, I can use gold. Even if the entire world falls apart, I can still use oil, I can still use gold. Bitcoin,
I agree with oil. I agree that oil has tremendous utility. The majority of gold's value is not because people make jewelry out of it. It's not. It's really because people store their value in it. Right. And so I'm saying to you, you're right. Bitcoin has some usage. You could actually go to El Salvador and buy things in Bitcoin. There is a pub in New York City that accepts Bitcoin. Okay, so there's some, but that's really on the fringes. The large majority, like gold, the large majority of Bitcoin's value is the fact that people store their money, their value
in Bitcoin,
in it. Okay, and for guys like you and I who have, grayish beards, mine more gray than yours, this is revolutionary for people not in our peer group, much younger than us. They think gold is for old people. They're storing their value in Bitcoin. They are technologically native people.
Yeah.
And so therefore, for them, it makes a lot of sense. It's just a matter of time, frankly. I mean, I don't mean to bring tears to the eyes of those people that love gold, but it's just a matter of time because of a generational shift that everybody, the majority of people, are going to go ahead and store their value in technology or in Bitcoin or blockchain, crypto, as opposed to storing it in gold, silver, palladium, those things. It's just not going to be anymore.
Tell me, what does it mean that the government is involved in this? Is it stabilizing the value of Bitcoin? Is it, I would imagine people who are into this are super excited that the government has invested a stake in this. What does it
Well,
mean for it?
So there's actually two aspects that people should think about. The first aspect is that the greatest superpower in the world believes that it should have an allocation, some allocation to this, which will immediately spring to the minds of all the other nations of the world. Well, if the United States is doing this, should we be doing this also? Right? And so obviously there's, we're talking about an asset that's scarce, right? Similar to gold, that yes, there's mining of it, but let's go ahead and say gold is somewhat scarce. So immediately you've got a limited supply, you've got rising demand, and so therefore, price should go up. So yes, people that own Bitcoin are excited about this. But there's a more fundamental issue here. The issue is the following. Why does the US government own gold? Why? Because you and I both agree, for as long as we can remember, gold is a place to store value where in times of difficulty, right? If we had a recession or a depression in this country, people would run to assets like that. And so
Right.
therefore, yes, it is good to have some money, some value stored in something that is not tied to the fortunes of the US government, right? We should own some stuff like that. Everybody should own some impenetrable asset value. And so from that perspective, it's a very important thing. It goes ahead and helps United States investors and citizens, as citizens, we are investors in the United States, have some comfort that everything that we've got going on here in the United States is not necessarily subject to the fluctuations of the US dollar. We actually have some value elsewhere. And for the United States overall, I actually believe, in stark contrast to a lot of the arguments that have been made by the left side of our government, in stark contrast, Bitcoin will never replace the US dollar. No one should get concerned about that. To the contrary, when other governments around the world understand that Bitcoin is a more stable asset than their own currency, there's likelihood that those governments will no longer print their own currencies anymore. I'm not talking about next year or 2 years from now. I'm talking about a considerable time in the future. They'll realize, what's the point of printing our own currency? We now have a currency that is not ours. It's nobody's, frankly. It's everybody's and nobody's all at the same time. Why don't we go ahead and adopt that as our standard in terms of currency, right? Why don't we adopt Bitcoin? Wait, let me finish the thought. And with that, the United States dollar will become even stronger, because Bitcoin will always be quoted in the United States in terms of its dollar equivalent price. We'll never quote the French franc equivalent price, right? We'll never
Right.
quote it here in the Argentinian peso equivalent price. But when Argentina, like El Salvador, goes to a full Bitcoin system, they will quote Bitcoin in US dollar terms. It is the strongest and most widely held currency in the world, and it will become stronger and more widely held because of Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, correct me if I'm wrong, has been swinging in value left and right. Every random blue moon, I would see a report that Bitcoin has lost X amount of value or that it's gained X amount. How is it stable if it's swinging back and forth in the way that it's being reported?
So if you look at the charts and if you look at historics, that volatility, that swing, has been diminishing and diminishing. Okay, and it will get over time to a point where it has fully been compressed. We're not there yet, and that's why we won't see what I'm talking about in terms of the adoption of it tomorrow. Because to your point, we do need to see that stability, that lack of volatility, for people to say, yes, I'm going to go ahead and put my trust in this. We're getting closer to that point. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. If it happened overnight, to the contrary, I would argue it is not real. It can't happen overnight. There's an evolutionary process that has to happen.
Why the volatility? Like, why does Bitcoin swing in the way that it does currently? As you said, at some point it's going to get compressed where it's, okay, this is where the value is. We have allocated a certain amount of value as a collective to this product. But why are the swings back and forth? Is it just, it's a new product, and because it's a new product, they're trying to figure out, okay, where does it actually fit in regards to its value? What's going on with this?
That's exactly right. Let me say it a different way, right? Right now, gold largely is a safe haven asset. I am arguing that Bitcoin will become a safe haven asset. Until it becomes a safe haven asset, and there's no threshold that it crosses that everybody agrees it's a safe haven, but at a certain point, everybody or the majority of people will say, oh, it is now a safe haven asset. Until that point it was reached, though, the alternative is that it's a speculative asset. And so it is largely in the speculative asset category, although less and less as each day goes by. But for now, it is majority, at least. I can't tell you down to percentages because this is not an exact science, but largely is a speculative asset. And because it's a speculative asset, we're speculating. I'm speculating that the US government's going to buy more Bitcoin. I'm speculating that there are other governments around the world that are going to go ahead and buy Bitcoin. This is all speculation and yet to come. And so therefore, because of that speculation, a lot of the price is built upon that speculation. Every time we get a piece of news out there that goes ahead and bumps down the likelihood of that speculation, the price moves, right? So this week, we're getting into tariff wars with all the people we know. Well, if we're getting into tariff wars with them, what's the likelihood that they're going to go ahead and do the same things as we do?
Yeah.
So therefore, the speculative community lost a bunch, this week. But again, on the long term, I firmly believe that that's the direction we're going in.
Two more questions. Trump is also invested in crypto, which people have pointed to and saying, wait a minute, this looks very dubious that the president is putting the US government into crypto while simultaneously also being an investor himself. Do you take issue with this? I mean, what's your take on this?
If I were president, I wouldn't do it. I think it's important for any civil servant to really have a disinterested profile vis-a-vis everything that that person is doing.
Agreed.
But that's not our president. Our president bought a Tesla on the front lawn of the White House yesterday.
Right.
So,
By the way, the audience may not know that. There was a bunch of Teslas that Trump effectively, he bought one on the White House lawn. Yeah.
He bought a red one.
Yeah.
He didn't buy a GM. He didn't buy a Ford. He didn't buy a Jeep or a Chrysler. He bought a Tesla. So, it is. It's what we've got.
It is what it is. Fair enough. Where do you think this goes ultimately? I think you seem bullish on this. And I think you're probably right about being bullish on it, considering the US government has just invested a huge stake into it. But where do you think this ultimately goes? I know you're saying various governments. El Salvador apparently is taking on crypto as their main currency. Many of these other countries that are weak in their currency. I mean, for God's sake, Ecuador, when I was in Ecuador, they effectively used dollars. I could effectively use dollars to go from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And so maybe these countries that have these currencies, where they tend to use other currencies as opposed to their own, they may get into it. You don't see a problem with this, though? It means that they're not sovereign currencies. The United States, we're $36 trillion in debt. So, but we make our own dollars. And other countries, if Britain makes pounds, for example, okay, well, Britain is a sovereign currency. The euro.
We have a euro. We have a euro.
Right. We
took out a bunch of local currencies with the euro, right? It's a regional currency. So yeah, I hear you in terms of there being one world currency. Maybe that's a problem, right? But my assumption is we don't get to a singular currency system. We will have a number of dominating. I don't think, China is ever giving up their yuan. There's no way, right?
But by the way, they've invested into crypto also.
Yes. They've done they've gone a different way on crypto. Their government issues the crypto.
Right.
And that, for me, as someone who holds, our freedoms, pretty near and dear, I don't like that.
And
As
this is the
there,
point of crypto.
it's a little bit too much information for anybody to have about where I'm spending every single dollar
Yeah.
of mine, especially a partisan group like the people that are controlling government at that time.
Right.
But in terms of where we go, I tell your viewers to go ahead and watch out for the United States, the states within the United States. We've got 19 states that have a bill inside of their Congress at some point in the cycle. Either it's already passed one house or it's being teed up to go ahead and approve Bitcoin for being put on the balance sheet of states. To me, that's an even more powerful force than the United States government. I mean, the United States government is going to make, front page news, but states is very important because for them, it's less about currency and it's more about investment, right? They don't print their own currency. They use the United States dollar.
Right.
But it's about investment for the state. They have money in lots of different things through their pension funds that they have to go ahead and, manage on behalf of their employees and their retirees, right? Pension funds of the United States, of the states of the United States, are some of the largest investors in the world, right? The California pension system is enormous. And so if they start to put Bitcoin and crypto assets as part of their investment world and portfolio, to me, that's a much more important exercise because we've got pension funds around the world, like the largest ones in the world now, own in some way Bitcoin, like the Norwegian pension fund or the Japanese pension fund, right? The country's pension fund. Own that being an asset that people are going to own, just like gold. By the way, I'm not diminishing from gold at this point. Just make the allocation equal to gold, frankly, in these places, whether it be 1%, 2%, 3% of all the assets. That to me is incredible.
Wow. David, fantastic breakdown. Honestly, fantastic breakdown. I'm fascinated by this. It's like digital gold in a weird way, where it's, I guess for me, it's ephemeral. And because it's ephemeral, I don't know, I'm old. I'm old. That's old. I'm old.
We all buy things on the internet, right?
That's true.
We don't think twice. We press buy, we put in our credit card information, and lo and behold, 2 or 3 days later, if you're Amazon Prime, same day, it shows up at your door. We don't think too hard about it, right? It took a long time for people that only went to stores before the advent of commerce on the internet to get used to that exercise. But now there's nobody on the planet that doesn't go through that exercise. The same evolution is happening in the case of value. As a matter of fact, I'd argue with respect to the value, it's a one-way exercise, right? You have to have trust when you buy something that you're going to send money and something's coming back to you. It's a two-way street. There's a lot of activity that needs to happen. When you buy Bitcoin, it's just one thing. You don't have to, there's no round trip of commerce. There's no counterparty. There's no credit card information. There's none of that stuff. I think it's a static asset as opposed to whatever you're buying in that box that comes to your door with a smile on it.
David Too Will, thank you for this, man. I deeply appreciate you explaining this to the audience and explaining it to me. I'm fascinated by this.
You got it.
Frank, with you. David Too Will, he's co-founder of ProChain Capital, a multi-strategy crypto asset fund covering the entire ecosystem of the burgeoning asset class. He has deep experience in crypto assets, token mining, venture capital, programming, and asset management. David has managed a hedge fund for more than 10 years and has earned a JD degree from the University of Michigan Law School. Thank you for this, David. I really appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Jamal. Have a great day.
You too. Have a good one. Oh, that is fantastic. I am, as I point out, I'm fascinated by this. It's new. I'm old. And because I'm old and I am ancient, I'm just unaccustomed to this new process. He's not wrong, though. I mean, when you buy stocks, you're investing money into something that you want to get money back from. When you're putting money in gold, when you're putting money in silver, stocks are not necessarily real things. Gold and silver are real things. I think the thing is, we're so reliant on technology at this point that if technology goes down, we're all screwed. And this is a factor of technology that is a store of wealth or store of value, that is a new device in order to store those things. But in all honesty, it is something that has started to grow. And now that the US government has a large stake in it, I know, it's fascinating. I don't like the idea that Donald Trump is also invested in it. I think that is deeply problematic. But for anybody that is owning crypto, and we had a lot of people at the company, at the station, that used to own it. In fact, our engineer used to be a big crypto person. This, for them, I would imagine, is fantastic news. And I would even go so far as to say it may, on some level, add to the stabilization of the value now that the US government has gotten such a huge stake in it. And if you're going to get additional states, if you're going to get additional countries that get more involved in it, you can imagine that this is going to be something that grows in value and stabilizes in value. It's fascinating. I am greatly fascinated by it. And David has my deepest appreciation for coming on and explaining it to the audience. When I saw that Donald Trump had invested, or let's say put the US government into it, my first thought was, okay, the audience should hear about this. This is news. This is meat and potatoes. Eat your peas. That's effectively what the news is. Coming up in 2 minutes, give or take, it's going to be KJ. There is something that is happening, or that happened in China, that I thought was interesting news. So 2 things are happening at the same time. One, there's a budget fight in the United States, and there's a potential government shutdown that is coming in the United States over that budget fight. Now, whether it shuts down or not, who knows? They may come to a deal at the last moment. They're trying to get some kind of budget reconciliation. But aside from that, there's a continuing resolution that they want to push out, going all the way out till like October or something. But effectively will last for like 9 months. Will they get that? Who knows? It is weird to me that we can't pass a budget. It's strange to me that we can't pass a budget. It comes across as just political dysfunction. Passing a budget seems to be the most basic thing in the world for a government to do. How can a government fund itself if it can't pass a budget? And what does it mean that it can't? Now, Daniel Lazar would say this government is dysfunctional, and that dysfunction has a lot to do with the fact that the Constitution is a very old document, that we religiousize it, if that's a word, I'm making that a word, put that in the dictionary, but that we give a religious tint to it, and given a religious tint to it, act as if it is impossible to change. And because we act as if it's impossible to change, the aspects of it that don't necessarily work well are just there. And so we have a minority-majority government with very few states having large control over the rest of the country, despite the fact that there are very few states and they are in the minority of opinion and of demographics. I think David is right, or Daniel Lazar is right. I would add to it, though, when a country starts, there is a revolutionary fervor in that country. And the people who eventually started are true believers in whatever that is. 250 years later, are they still true believers? Or are they people who are doing what is in their best interests, have gotten very accustomed to the document to which they're working with, and has found ways to be corrupt and get around? Because again, you are no longer a true believer. It's one thing if you fully believe in the tenets to which you are associating yourself with in regards to that new country. Fair enough. You're not trying to be corrupt. You are fully in the belief set of whatever that is. 200, 300 years later, not so much. Not so much. And so how do you get that revolutionary fervor where you get back to the basics and you get back to what are we actually here for? What does it mean to be a country? What does it mean to have a social contract? What does it mean to be a political leader, leading a country with that social contract and us filling the tenets of that particular social contract? We're not trying to be corrupt. We're not trying to take advantage. We're trying to do what is in the best interest of the public. How do you get to that? No clue. And can you get back to it, or can you get to it in the governmental structure that we have currently? I was super curious about that with China. Like, they are having, or at the very least yesterday, was the closing. What is the name of it? I'm trying to find the exact name of it. It was very long in regards to the name. But these kind of congressional meetings that were coming to a close. And I got super curious on how China passes its laws, debates its laws, how they come to some kind of consensus or conclusion in regards to what they want to accomplish. I mean, put it in context. California has put all of this money into high-speed rail and has built no high-speed rail. They seem incapable of doing it. How, as a government that has built the highway system from one side of the country to the other, why are they now incapable of building high-speed rail? China puts it down all over the place. The buildings that China have been building, like the stuff that they have been constructing, the mega projects. God, there's a site online called Mega Projects. Look it up. Many of those mega projects are coming from China in regards to what they're doing with changing the landscape in order to bring water to certain regions or divert water from other regions. It is astonishing. Why can't we do that? We used to do those things. And I'm saying having a government that is active, functional, competent, doing those things is on some level evidence of competence of the government that's doing them. Why have we lost that fervor? Why have we lost that capability? And why does China have it? That is a fascinating question to me. And yeah, it may be only fascinating to me, but fair enough. Smash up. I want an answer. Hence, me bringing on the man himself, KJ No. He's a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region. And he's a good friend of the show. KJ, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
Good, I'm doing well. Pleasure to be with you.
Oh, it is a pleasure to have you. There are several things that are taking place, and I want to get to the first thing first. So there was the 14th People's Congress, and there was also the Chinese People's Political Conference, the 14th one of those also. What are those?
They're what the Chinese refer to as Langhui. It just means the two sessions, and it's one is the National People's Congress. This is like the legislative body of China. It consists of almost 3,000 delegates who essentially pass law for the country. They've been working on laws all year long, and they've debated and negotiated and worked out all the laws. And then for 10 to 14 days in the spring, they get together and they do a final kind of reading and debate, and then they pass these laws. So that is the National People's Congress. And all the peoples of China are represented in the NPC. That's including the smallest ethnic minorities, some which have only a few thousand people, are represented at the highest levels of the Chinese legislative body directly in the NPC, National People's Congress. And then you have the CPCCC, which is it's a kind of parallel body which is consultative, and it gives advice and consultation to the government in general. So that's a little bit more informal, but it is also a very, very important body.
So just like the House of Lords in the UK. So you would have Parliament, House of Lords informs the point of view of the Parliament.
Exactly. Similar, except, of course, the main difference being that the House of Lords has these hereditary lords that simply are, powerful because they happen to be of blue blood, right?
Yeah, it's like, hey, you're important and rich. Why don't you come into the House of Lords?
And your children for perpetuity, right?
Yes, yeah. It's a weird thing. The Brits are, the Brits are the Brits. So, okay, so one informs the other, and the other one passes the laws.
Yes.
How the debates that are held? Well, two things. One, you said they represent everyone all throughout China. How are the representatives chosen for the people, for the Congress?
Well, they're elected at the local level, and then at the local, they go on to create bodies that elect representatives at the higher level, and so on until finally they reach the NPC. And at the level of the NPC, they've been elected by the levels below them. And so it is a kind of indirect democracy, if you will. But the key thing is it's focused on making sure that the most effective candidates rise to the top, the most qualified, not the most charismatic or the richest, but the most qualified as evaluated by their peers. So it really is a kind of meritocratic system that tries to make sure that the best, the most representative, and ideally the most ethical people rise to the top and are responsible for adjudicating and passing the laws of the country.
KJ, I would tell you this freaks me out.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell you why this freaks me out.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a monarchy,
Mm-hmm.
let's say you have a monarchy,
Mm-hmm.
you may get a good leader in that monarchy. And I'm not saying China's a monarchy dictatorship, none of that stuff. I'm just separate thought. Mark Sloboda pointed out this book called Leviathan to me by Hobbes.
Mm-hmm.
And I went looking through that book because if Mark recommended it, I was curious about it. And I even use the term Hobbes' choice when I talk about stuff. And so reading the book, fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
He argues effectively, you need a strong government, strong leader.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you get chaos. That strong government is the Leviathan, meaning you need this entity into the political space. Otherwise, it's just chaos. You have nothing to protect minorities. You have nothing to prevent disagreements. You have nothing to do any of those things, provided you have a strong central government. Now, I agree, but what if that Leviathan is a maniac? It's that part. And it's like if you have this monarchy. Okay, you can have an egalitarian monarchy. You may have the greatest monarchy in the world. What happens when you don't? When that guy dies and you end up with somebody who's a maniac? That is always the issue of power, right? Like if power is good, competent, reasonable, no issue. Everybody's happy, even if it's something where they don't entirely have choice. If they are good, they will be good. They're not going to complain.
Mm-hmm.
The US was that at one point. Something to that effect. Maybe it was never great, but at the very least, it was competent at one point. Even if it was racist, even if it was bigoted, even if it had slaves, it at some point was competent. We have lost that confidence. And, Daniel Lazar will make the argument that something needs to fundamentally change in our government, in our constitution, in order to get back to that level of competence and get back to that level of giving a shit about the American public that we lost. Are you concerned that at some point the revolutionary fervor and the competence of China would wane and you get a government where the public has no capability, very similar to the US government, have very little capability of changing because it's so indirect in the way that the government is effectively operated? Give me your take on that. Because I don't know a way out in the US. And I'm curious on whether the Chinese are concerned that at some point that government loses its competence and they, as the public, lose the capability of affecting the government because of how indirect it is. Meaning, we have lost that ability with something that is far more direct. Like when Princeton did their study, I think it was like 99%, 1% of what government does is affected by the American population and what the American population wants. That is amazing. That is a government that calls itself a democracy, or at the very least a representative republic. Is that a concern in China? And how does China have devices in play that prevents that outcome from taking place?
So those are very rich, deep, and complex questions.
Agreed.
The first thing I'll point out is that just look at the history, okay? In the United States, you can change the party, but you cannot change the policy. The policy is always the rule of oligarchy under a capitalist system. Anything that tries to change that is simply not allowed. So much for your representative electoral democracy. On the other hand, in China, you cannot change the party, but you can see that the policies are constantly changing. And that is because China has what they call a whole process democracy, which has grassroots democracy, grassroots electoral systems that are then kind of reintegrated into a larger meritocratic system that ensures that the best administrators rise to the top, the most ethical administrators rise to the top. And there's this constant process of feedback and consultation that's built into this. And this is something people don't understand. The Chinese government is constantly being held accountable at all times, and it does constant review, consultation, feedback systems. Those systems are more robust than almost any other country in the world. And that's why the Chinese government has a 90 to 95% support rating amongst its people, according to longitudinal studies by American scholars. This is not the Chinese saying this. This is what American independent, polling statistics have shown over the long term, that show that China is the government which has the greatest confidence of its people, more so than any other country in the world. And that boils down to a fundamental distinction between the Chinese government and, I would say, for example, Western European governments, is that in the West, you have this quote unquote, in China, the belief is that the government has to deliver. In other words, legitimacy comes from performance. They're talking about performance legitimacy. Whereas in the West, the idea is that as long as you have the process, it's legitimate. So what you have is process legitimacy rather than performance legitimacy. You're not looking at what the government delivers and whether it's actually doing anything for the people or whether it's actually fulfilling its promises that it's made during electioneering. And all you're doing is checking the box. Does it actually have, some kind of, formal, process that is quote unquote democratic. It's like, the Unitarian Universalists, they're all stuck on process. But in the end, what does it amount to? It amounts to a hill of beans. And as I said, in the US, and as you pointed out with the Princeton study, you can change the party, but it's a two-party duopoly of oligopolists, of monopolists, and you can never change the policy. You will never get single-payer healthcare. You will never, stop the endless wars. You will never get, a decent budget that serves the people, etc. So it's foundationally different.
Yeah.
There's one more piece I'll point out, if you don't mind.
Please.
Regarding legislatures and direct voting on legislation, which is the issue that you raised as a matter of concern, all legislatures are, all laws are passed indirectly through representatives. There are only 3 exceptions to that, possibly 4. There are 2 Swiss cantons where people directly pass legislation themselves. There is Athens, democratic Athens, thousands of years ago, and probably, some anarchist communities like the Zapatista community. Those are the only 4 examples of direct voting on direct voting. And every other democracy, quote unquote democracy, is essentially a representative democracy. The Chinese have made their own form of representative democracy. It fits. And the key thing to understand is it's talking about performance. What do you deliver? Not what you promise. What do you deliver? That's the difference that makes Chinese democracy. And the other pillar of Chinese democracy is competence, that you want the best people to serve and to lead. You would never get a Pete, the transportation secretary.
Buttigieg, yeah.
Yeah, you would never get a Pete Buttigieg
yeah.
in office, right? Because in China, he would have to go through another 20, 30 years of moving up the ranks before he could become a secretary of that level. He was the mayor of a city of 100,000 people. And I don't care how many languages he speaks, you have to show that you're able to effectively manage, a large polity before you actually get, you got the ranks. When the first Europeans came to China, and this was 15th, 16th century, they were astonished that they had this incredibly complex administrative state that was selecting only the most effective and competent people to rule. This was just mind-boggling for them. And the French copied this. This became the foundation of the French Grandes Écoles. And the Americans copied them. It's the foundation of the US civil service exam. But the Chinese made everybody who was a government administrator pass an exam and pass these exams over and over again until they considered you, qualified.
Yeah.
Yes. And those and just to go into the details, that capacity was built first on your understanding of classical texts of morality, of philosophical reasoning, etc. And then the other part of the exam was your capacity to extemporize poetry. That is, they were picking their administrators, their government officials, on the basis of their ability to write complex essays on philosophy, and on the other hand, their ability to write spontaneous poetry. I'm not kidding you. Yes. Can you imagine if we picked our legislators on their basis, on their ability to rap or their ability to compose poetry? How many of those people do you think would be, representing the government right now?
Why poetry?
It's very simple. Poetry it tests first your ability to communicate. Second, it tests your ability to empathize, your ability to really get into, to empathize with all things, to put your mind into other situations. And thirdly, it tests your ability to be creative under constraint, which is exactly what good governance is. And
that's interesting.
And the fourth thing it does is it weeds out the psychopaths, because there are certain types of psychopathic types that simply cannot compose a line of poetry. If you look at the leadership of the Council of Foreign Relations and you look at their prose, you realize that these are people that do not understand metaphor, that have no conception of any notion of creativity, etc. You weed out those people through that process.
See, the thinking is different. Like I know Mearsheimer has this belief that China is like they're lying, right? His belief is any country that is getting to a position of power is going to act in certain ways because they have to act in those ways in order to maintain that power. And that the US or the USSR, regardless of their differences, it's almost like you resemble your enemy in that case. Like the way you're thinking about the world is in these kind of chess-based thoughts. I need to maintain control. I need to maintain power. What are the things I need to do to maintain power and control? How am I going to be the hegemon? And somebody made the point of saying that if China had taken that position, like meaning if they were able to get in the position of, let's say, the United States, that they would have behaved differently. Well, Mearsheimer doesn't believe that. He doesn't believe that Chinese philosophy will end up in a different outcome, that China's stated view of the world will lead them to a different position if indeed they got to the position of a hegemon. They would start to act just like the US or just like the USSR did in a similar position. You don't buy that, though. You think that the Chinese framing of the world is fundamentally different and they would come up with a different outcome.
Yes, I absolutely believe that. And the example of that is thousands of years of Chinese history. They have never sought to conquer. There's a kind of natural boundary that they fill. Once they reach that boundary, they erect barriers to keep other people from invading, but they don't go out in search of wars, in wars of conquest, which is why, for example, you have India and Iran and all these big empires next to them. They did not clash with them. When the Persian Empire fell, the Persians escaped to China and they were given refuge in China. But China never went to war with Persia, even though they were large, powerful empires at their time. So it doesn't have this expansionist mindset. If you go to, the capitals of China, you'll see that all the streets are named for peace. The heavenly peace, earthly peace, the long peace. All their capitals are named peace. In the U.S., you only have one region or area which is named for peace, and that is Salem, right? Salem, Massachusetts, Shalom, right? That's peace. But otherwise, in the U.S., we name our streets after generals and warmongers. In the U.S., they name their streets for peace. That's what the Chinese culture is about, seeking harmony and peace. It's not a warrior culture. It's not an expansionist, imperialist, warlike culture. It is a culture that seeks administrative, good administration and harmony inside and internally. During the 14th century, 13th, 14th century, they had the largest navies on the planet. They could have taken over, they could have conquered the planet if they wanted to, but there is no record of them ever having used their navy to enslave, capture, colonize any country. They simply went ahead, traded, came back, brought some, trinkets from other places and shared things that they had. And so this is kind of the makeup, but it is so different from Mearsheimer's realism and the Western geostrategic conception of international relations. And that comes out of hundreds, actually literally thousands of years of warring European states that eventually, found a temporary reprieve under the Treaty of Westphalia. But there's some deep philosophical roots at the basis of that. And one of them is that Mearsheimer says that, states are the foundational entity of international relations. States seek their own self-interest. We can agree on these two, premises. And then he says that there is no overarching leviathan or order, and therefore the world is anarchic.
Right.
And then this is where he gets into trouble.
But wait, do you agree with that premise? Because that is true, by the way.
Yes.
Okay.
There is no leviathan. The UN is a very weak body. So we live in an anarchic world of states that seek their self-interest. Those are, I think, valid observations. The fourth one is where he gets into trouble, and it's where realists get into trouble, but it's deeply rooted in Western philosophy. And that is the notion that because we have these isolated states, they can never know the intentions of other states. All they can assume is the other states are in it for themselves, that they are seeking their own self-interest. So at the core of realism is an epistemic blindness. It's a kind of foundational blindness. And I say it has deep roots in Western philosophy because Western philosophy also believes that you cannot know the intentions of others, that you cannot know the existence of other minds, right?
But
you don't know.
See, I take that as being true. Like, it's a dark farce. And what I mean by that is, I can't know your mind. Like, I may know my mama's mind to a certain degree, on certain things because I've known her for so long. But do I really know what is in the mind of another person? Do I really know what is in the intentions of another country?
Yeah.
You're saying that's not true.
I'm saying that's not true, but you can create a worldview and an epistemology which takes that as foundational. So, for example, I mean, sorry to get philosophical on you.
No, please.
There's a dialogue between Chuang Tzu and one of his friends, and he's on a bridge, and he says, how happy those fish must be, frolicking in the waters. And his friend says, you are not a fish. How do you know what the fish are thinking and feeling? And then Chuang Tzu says, you are not me. How do you know that I don't know? Right? And so we start to kind of break down that charge. But let me put it to you this way.
Yeah.
There's some very fundamental things that can people understand each other?
Yes, I think so.
Yes.
To a certain
How
degree,
can
yes.
they do that? Yes, they communicate. They can read each other's faces, posture, body language, etc. People can communicate. And at a certain level, people can start to understand if you don't see yourself as foundationally isolated and just a brain in a vat that doesn't even know if other minds exist. You can start to train and to develop awareness of the other, so that what you get is a kind of intersubjective awareness, not a solipsistic, kind of unitary awareness, but an intersubjective awareness. For example, if you are in a relationship, do you read your partner's intentions and minds? To a certain extent, yes, right? Their
I've been
failure.
divorced, so I'm not the best at this, but yes, in working relationships, yes.
In relationships, this happens, right? If you didn't have that, you would have no relationships, right? Or all relationships would fail. We know that, 50% end in divorce, but there are at least another 50% where there's some kind of modus vivendi where people understand each other. So human existence is founded on our capacity to communicate and understand each other. That's how we live with each other. That's how we go through life without killing each other.
Agreed.
But the realist position is that can never happen, because we're so foundationally isolated that we can never understand the other. The only thing we can do is attribute self-interest to them, which for their self-interest conflicts with our self-interest. So therefore, it is in our interest to dominate the other.
Right.
So it's a theory of epistemic blindness, which is compensated with domination. And then from that, you're going to get the security dilemma. Both parties think this way, and then there's escalation, and then you're going to end up with war, or at the very least conflict, right? So that is foundational to the realist, neo-realist, defensive realist, offensive realist thinking. They all think that way. And it's built on a kind of foundation of solipsism, of individualism, of epistemic blindness, where you cannot communicate and you cannot understand the other. The only thing you can do is a kind of game theoretic strategy, where your best strategy is to dominate the other. And if you do that, then what you end up with hundreds of years of nonstop wars, or in the case of the United States, 237 years of war, etc. This is the thinking, and you don't end up with a good society, and you don't end up with a livable international system if you think that way. And the Chinese view is intersubjective. It's built on intersubjective, which is why they talk about mutual security, indivisible security, that we can come to a modus vivendi where we both agree and understand each other's needs and accommodate each other. It's very different from a realistic standpoint, which ultimately is projection. It's the projection of the Western controlling mindset, this dominator mindset, onto other cultures. But that will lead to war.
Agreed. No, you have my agreement. Look, that is a Star Trek way of looking at the world. I appreciate that way of looking at the world. And you and I have had these conversations before on how does that engage with a group that doesn't think that way. Like, because we don't think that way. And I'm telling you, we don't think that way. Like, it's not, like, that is not into the framing that we accept as a country. It's just not. And so it's like, how does China, who wants win-win relationships, deal with a country that fundamentally don't believe those exist and would end the world in order to maintain hegemonic control? Like, it is a fascinating dilemma. It really is. And I hope you're right.
Let me give you one more example, Jamal, just to make it real. Let's think about child rearing, like young children. young children can't speak, right? So there's not a lot of communication. So how do we know what they want? Well, there are two models, okay? One is you listen to them, you pay attention to them, you're very, very attentive to them, you hold them to your body, and you can sense what they need. And then you feed them when they cry and when they seem needy or distressed, and you take them to the bathroom and you let them go to the bathroom because you're simply in tune with their bodies. You're tuning
Right.
into what they need. Now, there is another model, which you often see in Western societies, which is that you just feed them on a schedule, right? You don't assume that you need to listen or attend to them. You feed them on a schedule, and then you force them into, toilet training. And if you do that, you end up with kids that are disengaged from their own sensations, and disengaged certainly more disengaged than other children who are raised in this much more cooperative, attentive fashion. And I would guess, psychologizing here, I apologize, I would guess that John Mearsheimer was raised, on a feeding schedule and, enforced potty training. And so then you end up, I don't know, and we just kind of use force and control and regulation to make everything happen.
Fair enough. It's like I said, I'm fascinated by, because you're right, it's worldview. There was, I hate to bring in Star Trek, and I want to go to Yoon Suk-yeol for a moment. No, what is it? Suk-yeol Yoon. I may be getting the name wrong. I haven't hit the story in a while, so the name is vague to me. There is what they call a mirror universe in the Star Trek universe. And one of the women came from the mirror universe, and she said, "You people are in a cult." Now, the fascinating part about this is that what she is pointing to is you guys have a worldview. It is only a worldview. It is only a philosophy. And yet you cling to this philosophy like grim death. And from our point of view, you guys are in a cult. That was the first time, I think, in Star Trek where they pointed out that Star Trek worldview is only a worldview. And the reality of it is, on some level they're right, on some level they're wrong. All of us are in a bubble, in a worldview with certain value sets that we take to be on some level real, that we engage with other value sets. We on some level are presented with the fact that we have a value set, even though we just assume this is the way the world works. And I suspect Mearsheimer, coming from the West, looks out and he says, this is the way politics has worked in Western cultures, going back from the Napoleonic era to before, where these guys will fight, lose, become vassals. And this goes on for hundreds of years, where it's just that process, back and forth. The US, colony of Britain, takes on the same mindset, the same worldview. Australia, a colony, takes on the same mindset, the same worldview. And this worldview populates across the world within the context of Western cultures, with Mearsheimer saying, this is the way the world works. This is what we've always seen in Western cultures. This is the way it develops. This is the way we are. And so this is the mechanics of how politics works across the world. Now, from his point of view, he's saying the world, but what he really means is in Western cultures. And your point is, this is not the way we think here. And so Mearsheimer is purely papering across reality what really is just thought in the West. That is fascinating, because I would say Mearsheimer doesn't know that his worldview is a worldview. He just thinks this is the way reality works. This is the fact that there's a worldview that underpins his point of view of reality. That it's not reality; it's his point of view. It's what is his name? What is his name? The guy for the Venus Project. When he talks about like our values need to change, our point of view needs to change. How we see the world and how we see what we see is normal, what we see is right, what we see is wrong, what we accrue value to needs to fundamentally change for us to get a different world. Your point is, China's point of view is different. It is a win-win relationship in a way where we see it as zero sum. That's fascinating to me. And like both of these things are existing on the same world, and for better or for worse, these things are in collision. And we are going to see what that looks like in practice. I'm fascinated by it. That is because China is going to be a hegemon at some point. There are 1.5 billion people. Those people have an industrial base that is extraordinary. And it's difficult for us to get our heads around the level of technology that is coming out of China. They're talking about putting satellite in space in order to get energy to transfer to Earth. These are mega projects. They're talking about putting bases on the moon. And considering the government that China has, they can do it. They can do it. There is literally nothing stopping them from saying, all right, let's put a base on the moon. They have a coherent government that has the capability of getting shit done in a way that we have lost. It is fascinating.
Do you know why they do that, Jamal? Do you know how they do that? They spend 4 times their budget. Their budget for education is 4 times that of their military. In the United States,
it's the other way around.
It's the other way around. The Chinese education budget is the same as the US military budget. So you can see where those priorities lie.
We dropped $10 trillion on war in Iraq. Think about that, $10 trillion. It's, and you think to yourself, what could you have done with that money? What could you have done with that money? I want to go to South Korea's president before I let you go. I'm keeping you a little bit long. I'm sorry. We'll get into it. I can't even call it a philosophical conversation because we're talking about, there's a philosophical underpinning to the way that the US and China operates. That even though it's on a lower level, it is being informed by a point of view. And that point of view is rarely discussed. Mearsheimer brings that point of view up, so good on him for doing so. But it's fascinating in how this philosophical underpinning undergirds how they behave and what that means in kind of this physical matter reality, this material space that we kind of operate in, and what they're willing to do for that philosophical underpinning and what they do, like how they engage with each other. It is fascinating. My biggest concern is that there are some philosophical underpinnings that override others. This idea of domination overrides everything else. There's no way around it. You have to win in order to, have your value set be the value set. In which case, a value set of win-win relationships is going to be stuck with having to fight the domination aspect because it's difficult to get around it. Like if you and I are talking and I decide KJ wants to beat me up, I don't want to fight KJ, but KJ wants to beat me up. What am I going to do in this situation? Right? Like me saying I'm egalitarian, I believe in win-win relationships. It doesn't matter if KJ wants to kick my ass. It's that issue, which means I need to be strong enough, even with my value set, to be able to stop KJ from kicking my ass, even if it's being strong enough where KJ says, okay, I'm not going to fight you. At the very least now, we have an understanding because KJ realizes he can't kick my ass. That seems to be the kind of this.
And the question to ask is, why would I want to do that to you, Jamal? Right?
Because you believe in domination.
And
you
why,
believe
yes,
you need to
right.
dominate.
And of course, we're just talking in abstract. Of course, I don't want to do that.
Of course.
But that assumption is wrong. And so it's very interesting. If you look at US-China dialogues, the Chinese always say over and over again to the US, for us to have good relations, the first thing you have to do is have the right perception, right? They say if you get the perception wrong, it's like putting the wrong button on your shirt. Everything else is wrong from that point downwards. And they say you need to get right perception. And what they're saying is, we don't have an intention to dominate you. We believe that we can communicate and cooperate and have win-win relations. But it's the US that has this perception of domination. And as I said, this is very, very deep in Western philosophy. It's based on the notion of an isolated self that is epistemically blind.
But you're never going to get the US to have that perception of China. And by the way, even if the US thought that, even if we fully believe that China wants win-win relationships, it's not going to matter from our point of view of how we operate. That's the issue. Like meaning, even if I accept and I say, you know what, China is different. They don't want war. They don't want to dominate. They don't want to be a hegemon in the way that these countries are a hegemon. Okay, fair enough. That has nothing to do with us. Like that's the issue, right? It's not just how we view you. It is our view of the world. It's not, it's, Okay, China is saying this now, but in 100 years, they're not going to think that. We may even think that. We, from our framing of it, this world is win or lose. There's no middle ground. We may come to terms with you. We may make agreements with you. We may balance out force in a way where, okay, we can't beat them, so we can't go to war with them, so we're going to make peace with them, and we're going to have a balanced playing field. Our point of view doesn't change, which is an issue. It's an issue. It just sucks. I hate that point of view, because I do believe that you can have win-win relationships. I do believe that I can accept, okay, he has things that he needs. And the moment that he has things that he needs, interests, then we can balance our relationship. We can be friends. We can accept that there are security wants, that China, and we have security wants. And we can come to agreements, meaning I believe that there could be world peace. So I don't have this framing in the way that the US frames the stuff. But they do. Rubio does. Trump does. Waltz does. Wiskoff most likely does. Like, the people who they're putting into positions of power, they don't think of this like we do.
You're absolutely right. And then there's structural factors, which is, that the US is built on domination, right? Historically and structurally, politically, it's built on domination. The US economy is parasitic on the global South. It sucks value out of the global South to the tune of trillions of dollars, and it impoverishes the global South. It's like a parasite that is constantly sucking the blood out of its host. And when the host wants to detach the parasite sees that, feels that as an existential threat. And so that's the other dimension. It's this core periphery, extractive relationship, domination and exploitation, which is founded in, a mindset, a philosophical mindset, which formed the basis of Western capitalism and Western imperialism. But that structural relationship makes it such that any country that tries to break out of that subordinated, subjugated relationship is seen as a threat.
That's when they need some freedom. That's when they need some quote unquote freedom. I got to get to President Yoon coming out of prison. This has not necessarily been heavy in our press, but this is him walking out of a jail cell, apparently.
But he's a prosecutor. He comes out of the prosecutorial corps. He was, like the Attorney General of South Korea. And he has a vast army of prosecutors under him. He said that when he became president, he would turn the country into a republic of prosecutors, which is what he did. So he's an army of prosecutors under him, many who are still loyal to him. Certainly the chief prosecutor could have appealed this decision to let him go, but he didn't. The way that he got out was on a technicality which has never been applied before in Korean history, and the courts have said that it should never be applied again. So again, he got this kind of sui generis, once in a lifetime get out of jail free card. But what it had to do is, when you're arrested, you can be detained for 10 days, after which you can be detained longer, but there's a process where you make that request and then it is extended either another 10 days or another 60 days, depending on whether charges are filed in a timely fashion. The prosecuting team says that, yes, they filed it in a timely fashion, and the court said, no, it wasn't filed in a timely fashion. And we're talking here about hours of difference, and whether you count certain kind of, decision processes into that timeline, and whether you count days versus hours. But it's really only a matter of hours. But they said, because he was not charged in a timely fashion, he has to be released. This is a man who's being charged with the most serious crime on the books, and they have decided that he can be let go free. And remember, he was holed up in his bunker and refusing any summons, refusing any service, and refusing any questioning. And now he's gone back to his bunker, and we're going to have a similar situation, plus the potential for, I believe, a civil war in Korea.
You think it's that extreme that it may end up to the point of a civil war?
I think we see the signs. I see the signs similar to kind of like a Maidan type situation where Yoon could be impeached. He is under prosecution. He has been indicted for insurrection. He's facing the death penalty, at the very least, life in prison. So he's going to fight for his life. He's going to pull out all the stops. And now that he's back ensconced in his bunker in the presidential complex, and even when he was in prison, he was inciting people. He and his allies were inciting people to rise up and to resist and to overthrow this unjust order. And get this, which is being directed by China and North Korea. This is what
That's his argument. That is his argument, that he's arrested because China and North Korea is influencing the government of South Korea.
Exactly.
That's outrageous.
Yes, but this is the kind of language we saw leading up to the Maidan. It also corresponds exactly to the propaganda that's coming out of Washington, right? That all these countries are falling under the sway of China, that China is influencing them. It's absolute nonsense, absolute and complete nonsense. But the fact that Yoon is using this trope is astounding. And there's the German broadcaster ARD, which is the German state broadcasting system. They have a budget which is 12 times that of PBS, 3 times that of CNN. This is a powerful behemoth. This is the media leviathan. And they just came out with a documentary which validated everything that is being charged by Yoon Suk-yeol's allies. Essentially, that Yoon Suk-yeol is being impeached because this is a conspiracy by China to attack him and to overthrow, autocratically overthrow the democratic of South Korea. This is the German government. This is what they put out on the public airways. So there's a coordinated attack. And this is the kind of situation that is the precursor or the precondition. It builds the preconditions, not only for civil war, but there's a template. It's a templated recipe that most recently we saw in the Ukrainian Maidan.
Who's running South Korea currently?
It's Choi Sang-mok. He is the Minister of Finance. And before that, it was Han Dok-soo, who was the Prime Minister. He was impeached because he refused to appoint judges to the Constitutional Court, which could impeach Yoon Suk-yeol. And so they impeached him, and so he's no longer prime minister. So number 3 in the Korean government, Choi Sang-mok, is the acting prime minister. But he again is very, very dodgy, and you can see that there's some very deliberate effects both in the courts, among the prosecutors, and in the administration itself, which is trying to paper this over and get Yoon off. And if Yoon stays in power, if Yoon is not impeached, then we can be quite sure that there'll be another martial law.
And hell will break loose if he comes back to power. Hell will break loose.
And if he doesn't, and if he is impeached, it's not likely that he will go quietly either. And so there again, we're looking at massive civil disturbance and possibly civil war.
But if he's impeached, he goes to prison or he's executed, correct?
No. These are 2 different processes. Impeachment is purely an administrative process, removal as president, and parallel to that process. So impeachment is for unconstitutional acts, such as declaring martial law without any justification and sending.
Prosecution is a secondary process after the impeachment.
Well, it's a parallel process because it's going on right now. Yes, because he has immunity as president, even as impeached president. He still has immunity from all crimes, but the only crime that he's not immune from is insurrection, because this is the most serious crime on the books in Korea. And he has currently been charged with insurrection.
Wow. KJ, man, you've been phenomenal today. I deeply appreciate this conversation. I know some of it is philosophical, fair enough. Politics on some level, undergirding politics is philosophical, regardless of what they're doing in action. So this has been, I've enjoyed this. I would say for me, just personally, I've enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate it. Just for the audience, KJ Noh, he is a political analyst, writer, teacher, specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region. KJ, where can people find you?
They can go to the China Report. They can see a lot of shows that I've done. This is on the Breakthrough News Network. And then they can also look me up on Counterpunch, MR Online, LA Progressive, Popular Resistance, anything that's progressive and forward thinking. I've probably written for it at one point.
Shout out to you, man. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. Have a good one. Be safe.
Thank you.
Great convo with KJ. I have deeply appreciated that conversation. Look, I got to be honest. Discovery sucked as a show. Let's not use Discovery. Deep Space Nine is a really good example. How does an entity, a country, a state that believes in this idea of liberty, egalitarian values, freedom, peace. I understand that my other person have things that they need and want, and I have things that I need and want. And philosophically, I have a belief that we can both find an intermediary, an agreement, in security for both in the context of both of our needs. That if I'm open to you and extend a hand, that hand will be accepted, because at the very basis of things, both of us want to, at the very least, come to some kind of agreement, and we don't necessarily want to be in a state of war. That's a philosophical point of view. That is a point of view I do believe firmly, that we can come to agreements, that we don't have to have this idea of shaking a fist at every country, that you can extend a hand and those countries will also extend a hand. Now, whether this is China's core basic point of view, people can debate, right? But assuming for the moment that it is, how do you deal with a country that just doesn't believe that doesn't have that belief set, that have this belief set? I have things that I need. If I need to go take them, I'm going to go take them. Other countries and other people have things that they need. If they need them, they're going to go take them. So I need to dominate. And I need to dominate in a way where I'm sure that my interests are maintained and that those interests are unimpeachable, won't be touched. If I'm in control, then I know my needs are met. How do you deal with a country that thinks that? Or how do you deal with people who think that? How do you engage with them? And truth be told, the only way you engage with them, because that point of view is a domination point of view. It supersedes everything else. I don't care how smart you are. If I can punch you in the nose, I can punch you in the nose. Your intelligence, in that case, doesn't matter. How do you make amends, make agreements, make deals? And truth be told, the only way you can do that is if you're strong enough to do it. If I am strong enough, I don't care about your domination. You can't dominate me. In which case, my value set of peace and win-win relationships will be the dominant theme, because I have, at this point, dominated and have dictated that to be so. By definition, that is a domination point of view that you're stuck with, because the other side is a domination point of view. It's awkward. It's an interesting clash between two philosophical points of view. It's fascinating to me. I used to ask KJ about this going back for like years when he used to come on the show. And you get into these type of conversations because what they are doing is being underpinned by a philosophical point of view of the world. I think it is fascinating. I think it is fascinating. I think it is fascinating. Let's go to chats before I close this, because this show has gone very long. Matthew, an absolute disgrace. Note that the United States also says children, quote unquote, forcibly taken. So any agreement by Russia would be a concession that they did so. Now, I gave a comment on that earlier. I'm not going to repeat the comment. Yes, I can. Putin did not steal those kids. Those kids were in a war zone. And the catch becomes, what do you do to kids in a war zone? Is their point of view that they should have left them in the war zone? I think that's outrageous. Let's keep going. Black Spot, shout out to you, Black Spot. Just for the name alone, shout out to you and thank you for my cup of coffee. Deeply appreciate it. Great analysis. Remember, it was years ago that Rubio was saying that Putin had cancer. They kept saying Putin has cancer, Putin is going to die within weeks. Now he is begging Russia to stop. Please, stop beating the shit out of our proxy in Kursk. Well, that please is not going to be honored. Thank you for that. The analysis was given when the show opened. That's what he's referring to. Let's keep going. Steve Talks. Love the name. Oh, let's go to the next one. Foment Dissident. Sometimes it feels like bashing Democrat is like being mad at a shield for blocking. I spoke about that earlier. Also, I don't think the Democrats' job is not to be a shield, it's to be a sword. At times a shield, maybe, but all things being equal, these are two warring sides. If they were at, let's say, of a higher intensity, Democrats and Republican parties will be sides on a war with their militaries and armies fighting for that particular side of the war. They've devolved this into the political space. My point of saying war, though, warring sides, their objectives, typically, in order to advance, you spread the thing that you want to spread. You dominate with the idea of having your ideas being the ideas that run the roost. In a political space, that is getting shit accomplished. They don't do that. They don't do that. I'd be mad at show for blocking. I love the comment. I understand where you're coming from, but they're supposed to be more than that. Janice Anderson. I remember when you were supporting Bernie, you go live in the middle of the night. Yes. When real men can't sleep, real men do the news. I'm an insomniac, so you used to see me here at like 3 a.m. Very early, great having someone with similar thoughts. Yeah, I don't hate the guy. When I do a video and I'm showing Bernie Sanders testicles in a jar at the Democratic convention, hurts me to do that video. I hate doing that video. When I do a video saying there needs to be something beyond Bernie Sanders, I hate doing that video. Those are videos that I don't get out of bed in the morning to do because I enjoy doing. I find myself doing it because I think it's necessary and I think it's true. If you are channeling all of this energy of correctness in regards to the political philosophy of what you want to accomplish in economic populism, God bless you for channeling and getting that energy. But if you then turn in a couple of years and say, by the way, we need you to vote Joe Biden. We need you to vote Hillary Clinton. And these people are representative of none of the things to which you espouse, who did everything in their power to put a knife in you, to prevent you from winning that race. And you con, that's strong enough. You con the American public into believing that Joe Biden is the new FDR. You con your supporters into voting for Hillary Clinton. Okay, that's a problem. That's a severe problem. You've taken all of this populist energy and is trying to transfer it to a group that is in no way populist. In fact, are in utter shambles at this moment. That's a problem. There needs to be something beyond Bernie Sanders. I don't know what that something is. There needs to be something beyond Bernie Sanders. That's my point. Janice, God bless you. You're absolutely right. And I do also appreciate somebody that has similar sentiments, that have come to similar conclusions. Thank you for that. Alexander G. I'm fascinated with what YouTube AI auto moderation deletes and what it doesn't delete. It points a very clear picture in the agenda of YouTube rulers. Now, I will tell you, I have not deleted anything. The chat typically goes by so fast that I see bits and pieces and blurs of the conversation that you guys are having. Also, on my side, I usually have my volume control up because my volume fluctuates based on StreamYard. So I don't delete any of your comments. I don't delete the trolls. I don't delete any of it. From my point of view, a troll is just a view, no more, no less. I don't feed them. I don't really care about them. I've been doing YouTube for the last 10 years. Jesus. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. The deletion is not something that I add into it. If I had 5,000 people watching and it filled it up, okay, fair enough, I may get a moderator. I don't. So if YouTube is deleting it, it is YouTube that is deleting it. Alexandra just pointing that out. And I guess that reinforces your point, what they delete versus what they don't. Super interesting. Alexander G, again, correct syntax and spelling while making a valid point. Your comment gets auto-moderated. That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate, especially if it's a valid point. Guys, we have come to the end. This has been a barnstorming show. I went long with KJ because I'm fascinated with what KJ is saying out of his mouth. And it's not that I disagree with him. Look, if we accept it just as a premise of operation, then we can cooperate. And we do. Cooperation, I would argue, is on some level basis of reality. And what I mean by that is, in order for me to build a building, in order for me to build a house, in order for me to build a company, in order for us to do scientific projects where we send people to the moon, send people to Mars, send satellites out in space, it all requires cooperation. Meaning anything that you are doing in this reality space that grows, that is big, that is complicated, requires help. The cells in your body, in order to make you, come together in order to make a larger organism. The liver doesn't bitch to the heart about, hey, I think I'm more important than you because I clean the blood. It doesn't do that. As human beings, we do. But same token, as human beings, we have this amazing capacity to cooperate, to understand that other people have interests and needs, providing we're not sociopaths or psychopaths that come to a conclusion that the world is entirely and fully about domination, because you can have that as an undergirding of everything else if that's what you effectively need. Meaning, I can always pick up a gun if I need to pick up a gun. So can that other person if they need to go to war for something that they care about that is that significant. I'm saying, though, that that is not the only way that human beings can engage with each other. We engage with each other in the spirit of cooperation. Bob has needs. I know Bob has needs. He's a human being. I have needs. Does Bob recognize and understand my needs? And on the same thing, you can do that from the standpoint of countries. I would go so far also as planets. KJ's right. The problem is he right in 100 years? Is he right in 100 years? And that is the argument that the US government will make. Okay, they feel this way now because they're not in charge. When they get in charge, are they going to function the same way? It's political philosophy. But that philosophy can change. And in the same way we have this thought of force, domination, we must control, etc., we can also have cooperation as a basis of undergirding the way we engage with the world. KJ's right. I just don't know what that looks like in practice when these two philosophies run headlong at one another. It's fascinating, terrifying on some level. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. Shout out to all of you for joining. You guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Jamal Thomas Morning Show, episode 112. Signing off.